Glenn, thanks for coming on.
All right. Glad
I
to be here.
appreciate it. Yeah. I was really looking forward to talking with you. We've been going back and forth for a while now. I first ran into you in Hawthorne.
That's right.
In
You were
real
walking
life. But before that, and this is back to what you were talking about the video, I did watch you on YouTube on one of your videos. I don't know, something to do with a helicopter or whatever. We'll get talking about helicopters, but I appreciate you coming on. And you are, we don't even have to say the name if you don't want to, or we could, but you are a pilot, you're a captain for a major U.S. airline.
Right.
And so you have, and other than that, when we get talking about your background, you've done Air Force to major, and not the conventional regional to major.
This is 40-year journey.
40-year journey,
Yeah.
and you have 20-something plus thousand hours of flying time.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
fly
over 20,000.
helicopters, and you fly tail wheels, and so you're very much an airline pilot who is still very much in touch with GA.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love general aviation.
You love general aviation, which you don't see all that much. I mean, I think most airline pilots you talk to, they don't know how to start a 172 anymore.
No, that's very true. And you know what? I don't poo-poo them. I'm like, different strokes for different folks. I could easily have almost avoided GA completely if I had just joined the Air Force. Pilot training, when I did it, was all jet. So you started in the T-37, went to the T-38, graduated, went to your primary weapon system aircraft, and then you could fly for 20 years, and you won't even hold an FAA certificate. You won't even hold an FAA certificate
In the Air Force.
Now they've changed the training program, but when I did it, no, you would just be an Air Force pilot. And there have been guys who did 20 years in the Air Force, never even thought about GA, and then they needed to get a job, and they said, so they would have to do all the ratings from scratch. Now, there is also, bringing your military records in, getting some of the ratings via equivalency.
Right.
But, they wouldn't hold any ratings to get an entry-level job, not even a private pilot certificate.
So when you
started, yeah.
When you started.
Ever since then, there have been changes to where I got 10 hours from the Air Force. The Air Force paid for my first 10 hours here at Santa Monica Airport to solo.
Whoa.
And so you soloed in 10 hours. And they just wanted to make sure you knew up from down, left from right, and had a little hand-eye coordination. And then they weren't going to pay for any more. And they're like, okay, now you're good. I could have done no more flying, but most people just went ahead and finished their private on their own. And that's what I did. I went out to Van Nuys. It was cheaper. Finished my rating, and that's where I started doing tailwheel flying because I go, well, you can go for so many $100 hamburgers, but I think I will, get checked out. And then it was not an endorsement to fly tailwheels. It was just a checkout. It was like any other airplane checkout.
Whoa.
And I was doing it to do acro, but the plane had a tail wheel on it. So showed me how to fly it. And I don't know. I looked in my logbook not too long ago. I had maybe 5 hours. That sounds about average for people to get a tail wheel endorsement. But we were going out every time and do acro. We weren't beating up the pattern. I was just coming back and doing, one to a full stop because I just was doing it for the aerobatics.
Love it.
Then... so did that right up till pilot training. And plus, part of the reason I did that was so that I go, well, we're going to be doing loops and rolls in the Air Force in pilot training. I'll see if I like it. And I did. So I'm like, plus a little more skill. You want to hedge your bet. And aviation's that way if I know it's a all or nothing kind of thing, pilot training, when we got there, they did the classic look to your left, look to your right. One of you won't make it to the end.
I heard that from someone.
So it's back then it was a 2/3 graduation rate, so about 33% washout rate.
Whoa!
And so to give myself a leg up, I wasn't going to be the one who showed up with 10 hours of flying time. So I had about 100 hours when I showed up at the Air Force, and I had my private and was doing tailwheels, but again, it wasn't a endorsement.
Yeah. Do you know if that's sound advice for, I don't know how in touch you are with the Air Force today, for people heading into the Air Force today to show up with flying time under their belt, or is
I would.
You would.
First thing I would want to make sure it's something that I like.
Right.
If you have a chance to try it out, I always say try it out first before going to the Air Force to do something that you've only seen on television. That's a big commitment.
Right.
So, and there will be things about flying like, checklists and discipline and procedures and, 3 dimensions. I've taken people flying who thought they wanted to go all the way to ATP, And the moment I banked the plane, it was, whoa, 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 what's that?
I totally get you. I took my mom flying.
Yeah.
She was good, straight, and level. Then we banked.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, she had to close her eyes.
Where are they going to fall out?
Yeah.
You're like, well, there's a little physics involved here.
Yeah.
Probably should have did a little ground instruction. But some people it won't matter. It's an uneasy feeling. So at least take a flight and see if you like it.
That's I think that's true. I mean, we tell it to people who are interested in getting their private. So I guess it's good advice for I want to go to the Air Force too.
Yeah.
Yeah. See
or
if you're
the
into
airlines.
flying.
Yeah. People think, oh, I'm going to go all the way to do that, and they don't even. And that's part of what your podcasts are about, is giving people a feel.
Exactly.
By talking about people who've done it.
Exactly. Yep. So today, hopefully, we'll cover a lot of things that you've done that I'm sure so many people out there are curious about. Whatever it might be, helicopters, Air Force, airlines, the whole thing. So let's run real quick about take me to Glenn as a kid. Were you one of those kids? I always want to fly, or you're an anomaly?
No, so I thought about that too, and I thought I remember telling my mom and dad I wanted to go to the airport. Well, we had been down to LAX to pick up relatives, and
So you're from here?
Oh, I'm from here. I was
From
born
LA.
in Culver City.
I gotcha. Okay,
Yeah, so I've lived here my whole life.
I got it.
Well, not my whole life. I got in the Air Force and left, and then I've never really been back.
Got it.
Yeah, but I wanted to go look at the big planes. Back then, the 747 was the queen of the sky, and I wanted to look out the glass at the nose of that thing and look up at the cockpit. You could go to the gate then. Well, you met your relatives at the gate. There was no TSA security. You just walked through the airport up to the gate, and your smiling face was there when they came up the jetway. And now, obviously, you can't do
All
that.
different.
You can't pick people up that way. But that was my vision of going to the airport. And they took me to Santa Monica Airport. And I was like, well, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to see these little airplanes. But then, and they got a little observation deck, and I think it's still there with the loudspeaker going, so you can hear the planes talking to the tower. And I kind of warmed up to it, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty neat.
How old are you at this point?
I was probably 8, 9.
Okay.
And then went to high school, and I was still interested in. I knew people who did some flying, but I couldn't afford it, and it wasn't in my thing. But as got time to go to college, I had thought about it, and watching television, like, oh, I might like to do Air Force. And my dad really thought, oh, well, you should go to the Air Force Academy. Well, in his mind, if I go to the Air Force Academy, he won't have to pay. College is free, right? That's really where his brain was. But
it's a good thinking dad.
I was like, well, they don't let everybody be pilots. That's what I told him. I said, they don't let everybody be pilots. But I did see a magazine coupon, the little things that fall out of the magazines or you got to pull them out.
Uh-huh.
And it was I was planning to go to UCLA, and it said ROTC. And so I go, I'll fill this in. So I filled it in. It was prepaid, put it in the mail. They came back at me and had an appointment for me. When do you want to come in?
Whoa.
And I'm like, okay. So I went to UCLA and sat down with their professor of aerospace studies, and he goes, well, what do you want to do in the Air Force? And I said, well, I'd like to be a pilot. And he wrote it down. And I go, well, that was really easy.
What?
Yeah, he wrote it down, a pilot. But that's obviously not the whole process.
So does that mean that many people did not want to be pilots in the Air Force?
Yeah, you could do anything. You
Wow.
could be a lot of people sign up for their medical program because they'll play for your medical school.
I'm such a pilot because in my limited bubble, I assume everyone want to be pilots.
Yes.
And so when you say that, I'm like, what? Do not everyone want to be pilots? But yeah, I got to remind myself.
Yeah, I got to remind myself that the joy I get from flying airplanes, going places, operating the machine, that other people achieve those same things doing other things. I could see how a brain surgeon, poking around inside somebody's skull, sets them up, fixes them, right? I'm like, that's got to feel pretty good.
While you have no interest in doing that yourself.
No, I think it'd be cool too.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah,
I don't have enough lifetime left to do that. Plus, I don't know. I don't know if I have maybe I have the dexterity. I think it'd be really fascinating.
Yeah.
But you got to start from scratch to do that right.
So I'll send when I get a brain surgeon on here. We know who will watch that episode.
Well, it's funny because like that client I had on the phone, he is a doctor, and he's an AME. He does medicals.
Okay,
and stuff.
cool.
So
that'd be a cool person
he's
to talk
a
to.
doctor, but he flies, and we all know about doctors and planes. They show up and they want to fly, and they're really good at the thing they do already, and they kind of sort of expect to be instantly good at it, but they forget that they have all those years of knowledge and experience they gained over time to get to there. But somehow they think it transfers, but it doesn't. Just like I can't scrub in and go into the operating room. Well, I'm a really good pilot, so I can do
100%.
brain surgery. Now I'm going to mess that up.
100%.
So, and again, like I said, I would think it would be cool to do. I didn't have the desire when I was young, and so I don't have a lifetime to invest in that.
Right.
Maybe
right,
next time around.
So let's just because you brought that up, let's talk to that for let's touch on that a few minutes. Other than airline pilot, which we'll get to everything, you're also an active flight instructor. You teach people how to fly.
Yeah.
How have you found, what's a good way you found to deal with this idea that some people might show up with? And like you said, I'm really good at other stuff in life, what I do, and I expect my flight training to go the same way. And then it might not go the same way because flight training is new to them and it's different. How do you deal with that as an instructor? Or have you ever had to deal with that?
Well, I'm not, in my thinking on everything, I'm not binary. It's not either one or the other. I go, there's everything in the middle. And so I'll tell people, I go, we could just do this one flight. You see what it's like. Or, we can keep going as long as you're interested. And even on that flight, I go, we want to stop flying when it stops being fun. So if you're going to go do aerobatics, there are all these other things that go on in somebody's head, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is they may be a little self-conscious. They had one vision of how this was going to go,
right,
and they're sticking to it, even though it's different than they thought, is I can get people to be as honest as they can about how they're feeling right now. And my last couple of students have been flight instructors who wanted to do aerobatics. They're easier at communicating how they're feeling because they understand. They're empathetic to their students. Now they realize that I'm empathetic to them, that I want to stop. I don't want anyone to puke in my plane.
Right.
I got bags.
Right.
But the thing is, I don't want that to be the memory they go away with.
Right.
So when somebody's new and they're showing up and they want to go fly, I go, I'm a small flight school because you're looking at it. I'm it.
You're it.
I got me and 2 aircraft, and I'm not selling you a package.
Right.
Because I think a lot of places want you to sign up to spend $20,000 on flight training, and I'm not that way. I'm the opposite of that. I go, I want you to sign up. We're going to go fly, and we'll see what we like. And you can fly once a day, once a week, once a quarter, once a year.
Right.
Doesn't bother me. I want to share flying with as many people as I can.
Right.
At the rate they can afford and want to. And some people need refreshers. Some people need a flight review. Some people just want to try it.
Right. I like what you said, that we'll stop flying when it's no longer fun. I'll never forget online when I was getting my private. I think this is so true, and I try and instill that in my own students. But when I was getting my private instructor always used to say, I remember practicing like diversions or engine outs, just things that weren't the most fun. And his attitude always was, he said, hey, listen, flying an airplane is all about having fun. But sometimes there's things we need to do in order to keep having fun. So let's get them out of the way as quickly as we can so we could get back to having fun. And he always used to say that, and I'll never forget it. And I'm like, oh, that's a good way to look at it. Like, there's some stuff that even in an emergency, there's something that needs to be handled, but let's take care of that as fast and efficiently and safely as we can so we could get back to what flying's all about.
Right.
And he instilled that in me. And so every time I hear people talk about that, I have a personal appreciation for that. Ooh.
You didn't pay the light bill.
I'm telling you.
Actually,
it's the box. I had to move the box because the thing.
Oh, the motion sensor?
Yeah, it's a motion sensor. Let me move that. Yeah, it's the motion sensor. You didn't pay the light bill. There we go. You live and you learn.
Yeah, so as long as we keep moving a little bit, it knows.
Oh, yeah, that will right now it's fantastic. We don't have to even move a lot. It was just the box was blocking it.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, when things happen like that, it's like, oh, we got to do the whole thing over. I go, no.
Oh, heck
no. That
no.
gives it character.
Oh, yeah. People want to see this. Yeah,
that's real life.
How many shows get the lights out in the middle? This is solid. So that's and with my own students, it's always from day one, I always say, hey, flying's about having fun. Flying's about having fun. It doesn't mean that every second of flying you'll be sitting there ecstatic, but it does mean that at the end of the day, flying is not about puking or being hot and headaches and nausea. It's not about that.
It's funny. So you mentioned all the detriments to it. Buddy of mine, he's an outdoorsy guy, and whenever I visit him, we go hiking, and it usually ends up turning into scrambling and sliding down hills and past rocks and brush and getting all scratched up. And we went into an REI or something, and he goes, "Oh, you guys had type 2 fun." And I went, "Type 2 fun?" We look at each other. He goes, "Yeah, type 1 fun." He goes, "That's fun instantly. That's like, I'm trying to think of something that's instantly fun. Throwing darts at the dartboard or, a water balloon fight. It's fun while you're doing it, right?" But he goes, when type 2 fun, maybe you're rock climbing or hiking up a hill, like you're climbing the bottom of the Grand Canyon to the rim, and that's strenuous.
I like that.
But when you look back at it, it was really fun. While you're doing it and your throat's dry and you wish you were there already and you wish you had an ice cold drink in your hand, but you're making it to the top. Then you get to the top and you look out over the canyon, and then you get the cold drink and you're sitting there and you forget the struggle that you had all the way up. And then that is type 2. It wasn't fun so much while you were doing it, but it's fun now. And it kind of goes back to that thing you said earlier. We'll get the hard stuff out of the way so we can go back to having fun. We're having fun. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
This was fun at the end.
I love it. I love that. Another way you could think of it, I guess, is like hindsight fun.
Sort of, yeah. So type 2 fun is fun that's fun when you look back on it, not really while you were doing it as much.
Love it.
Yeah.
It's like working out, the gym or something.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Solid. Cool. Good. So I love that we're on the same page, and we could share with people that if someone's looking to get into flying, it is about having fun. And if someone's not having fun in every single flight lesson, maybe you look at changing some stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's a problem. Because even in flight training, even during the period in time of a pilot's life where they know the least, they're learning the most, their brain is probably taxed the most, more than it'll ever be, even during that, fun should be had.
Right.
And so if it's not, and many people don't know this because they're new to it, they think it's supposed to suck until I get my private. Which unfortunately, many things are slid under the rug. So I love that we're talking about that. Good. So let's keep trying to stay here on track with the background. So you go to the Air Force.
Yeah.
And how long do you spend there? What do you primarily do there?
Well, when I did it, it was 1 year.
Okay.
So it's a 1-year course. I think it was 49 weeks.
Okay.
Is what the course was. They've changed a lot of things since then, and I've not kept track. But you had at least your 10 hours.
Right.
So
Solo.
you knew up, down, left, and right. But
and you knew how to land.
Yeah, and you soloed an aircraft.
Right.
So they knew that you could be in an aircraft by yourself and not die. So did that, and then I'm trying to remember the flow of things, but you do a little, obviously some academics, and there's some administrivia too, because you just entered the Air Force.
Right.
So you got to know how everything works, and it's funny how you start, but you really don't know how everything works. You got to learn as you go. So they give you enough few days of indoctrination, and you've had it kind of all along. I went through ROTC, but even in officer training school and certainly at the academy, you get enough information about what your future life is going to be like and different things that go on. So they have kind of groomed you for that position. But then there's kind of a crash course in all the administrivia that you got to go through. And then there's flight training. And like parachuting is a funny thing because all the airplanes, the trainers all have ejection seats. And so you may have never parachuted in your life. Well, they're not going to give you a parachute course. We did a lot of jumping off of a 5-foot stump and doing what we call PLFs, parachute landing fall. So you learn how to land so you don't break your legs. And then to actually get a little flight, you've seen parasailing off the coast, like behind a boat.
I have.
They do that with us behind a pickup truck.
That's so funny.
They tie a rope to you and your parachute, you get it inflated, and then they pull you until you're moonwalking into the air, and then they let go. And then down you come, you do your landing fall, and box checked. You've now, if you eject, we have a good level of confidence that you can land.
So that's basically meant to semi-simulate an ejection
Yeah.
from a seat.
Yep, we spent a day of that. I got a bunch of pictures before digital photos. You get your disposable camera, pop a few photos of you and your buddies doing these parachute landing falls.
Whoa.
And
do you know
then-
if they still do that the same way today?
Nope, don't know. Probably
Probably the
because
same.
that's about as economical as it gets. You don't have to hop in an airplane. No one's going to die. They'll probably just break a leg.
Right. That's
So-
it's funny. I actually was watching a video recently about what are the what happens to a pilot who ejects, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they were saying something to the effect that while there may not always be repercussions from the Air Force in terms of like punishment,
Right.
if at all, but that pilot might not fly again because they might
Injuries.
be injured.
Yeah.
God, so in a way, the ability to eject from a fighter or a plane is not meant to save the plane, but it's not even meant to save your career, but it's meant to save your life.
Just save your life. Yeah.
Like a parachute in a Cirrus.
Yeah. Well, because the airplane's totaled. I
Totaled.
understand when you pop the chute.
And even if you get a slightly injured, that's still better than
You can buy another plane.
Right.
You can't buy another Yoel.
Exactly.
So-
So that means, and is that true where most of them had to end their careers because they were that injured?
No. If you've injured your back due to the ejection, then you can go to a non-ejection seat airplane.
Got it.
And if you're still okay, you just keep doing what you're doing.
That's a good point. Got it. Okay, so you do that training, and then you spent 20 years in the Air Force.
Yeah, well, then you start flying. I didn't finish pilot training, but T-37, you fly it a bunch, solo it, then you'll mix some solos in there with dual instruction, and you get all the ratings. And they had simulators, too,
Okay.
which is something that, you're a pretty junior aviator at that point. You don't even have 100 hours, but you're getting some training and some pretty good equipment.
Right.
And so it's great to have a simulator for instrument training, and they really drive the instrument training home. I don't know I'm sure the other services are the same, but when you're doing your instrument training along with your basic training, it's really instilled in you, and you fly better.
Huh.
Because even VFR, you maintain an altitude airspeed heading. It's always we called it a composite cross-check, outside and inside.
Huh.
So if you're in the clouds, it's 80% gauges. You're still looking outside 20%. But and then whenever you're flying VFR, it's 80% outside, but you're still checking your gauges, altitude, airspeed, heading. So you're always looking at both things.
Interesting.
So it's awesome training to learn both things at the same time. So you'd be doing instrument rides and what we call contact rides, which were visual maneuvers. We'd do stalls, steep turns, slow flight in a jet, and then we would do loops, rolls, clover leaves. In the T-37, we learned a lot of aerobatics, and it's not that it's required, but I had a student recently, and her dad really wanted her to have some upset recovery training. And I advertised that, I'll give you upset recovery
You do
training.
that too as part of your services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I go, well, because she wanted to do aerobatics. And I go, well, we'll do the aerobatics. And I go, once you can do aerobatics, there are no unusual attitudes. Because you're in every pitch, bank, and roll you could be. So
It's
I go,
all usual.
yeah, exactly. Now, of course, the fact that you entered a maneuver knowing how it was going to go is different than finding yourself suddenly in a unusual attitude. So, yeah, you would recover that. But the fact that you've done aerobatics, you go, oh, I'm nose up, upside down in bank. I'll just increase the bank. Well, I'll not be upside down, let the nose fall to the horizon, roll wings level, and power is required.
Yeah.
So she really had no problems at all. She was awesome. And she wants to come back.
Upset recovery.
Because she had fun.
She had fun.
Yeah. But
That's important.
So anyway, that's what pilot training was all about. And you had in the T-37, our instrument check did not really give us the instrument ticket. But then you move on to the T-38, which is it's faster. So you've got that, and higher performance, flies higher, go cross country a fair amount. And both airplanes, a bunch of formation flying. So we did that, and your performance in those phases of flight will kind of categorize you whether you're going to go to heavy airplanes or what they had tanker transport bomber track and fighter attack reconnaissance track. So if you were going to fly single seat or two person crew airplanes, if you did well in formation and aerobatics, those things, you'd move to that track. And then if you did less good, you'd go to the tanker transport bomber where there was a when you sit in the right seat, it's kind of an apprenticeship. So you'll be flying in a crew.
Interesting.
They also would take people who did really well and take them back as instructors. That was called being FAPed.
FAPed.
So, first assignment instructor pilot.
FAPed.
So, and I used to think it would make more sense to just bring people back from the field who've been out there, and they do that. People who have had an assignment already come back to the schoolhouse and teach people to fly. But the first assignment instructor pilots have a fair amount of value. Just like when you're first learning, you do all your ratings, you get your commercial. Then a lot of people go CFI and double I and turn right around and start instructing. And that seems like, well, you just learned it. How can you be teaching? Well, exactly. You just learned it. So you remember what you went through and what it takes to learn, so you can be empathetic to your student because you know exactly what they're going through because you just did it.
It's fresh on your mind.
Yeah. Whereas for me to give primary instruction right now, I'm like, that was so long ago. I'm struggling, though, to identify with the feelings you're having, the apprehensions. And so things that I'm not apprehensive about at all anymore, and I've long forgotten that power on stalls bother people because the nose can get pretty high and the wing's going to fall off. And that wing falling off is pretty traumatic. It's
That's
like
the
a heart
scariest
attack
thing for student pilots.
But I go, look at all this altitude we got. You could do nothing and we'll recover this plane. So I'm not afraid of the plane, but they are still apprehensive.
Right.
Anyway, so we do all that stuff, and then at the end of pilot training, you get your instrument rating in the 38, and then you go down, you pick which track, and then maybe a little more formation flying, like four-ship formation for the guys who are going fighter attack reconnaissance, and then there'll be more low levels and cross countries for the tanker transport bomber people. And that was when I went through. They may have changed this a little bit. They have added planes. There's the... I'm trying to remember the little business jet that they have added. I can't think of it right
Lear?
now. No, it's I think it's a beach jet. I think it's a they added a beach jet, and that would be down the tanker transport bomber track.
Beechcraft?
But they're still using the T-38. And I guess since I've read that they've come up with a replacement for the T-38, but it's not on the street yet.
Oh.
And it'll be more like a fighter. So, but that was pilot training. And then get your assignment. And I remember listing all my planes. You list every plane in the inventory that you want to go to. And I really wanted to fly.
So they ask you.
Oh, yeah. You get a choice.
And you say, here's all the stuff in order of importance.
Now, they're not going to let you fly ones that you're not qualified for. And you're competing with your classmates on performance, test scores, and all your check ride scores.
Is there any concept of seniority in the Air Force like the airlines? Or is it all performance?
No, actually, it's more performance-based, really. I mean, there's still rank, and the rank determines your pay, and it usually comes, you could be mostly on time to the rank. So 2 years, you're a second lieutenant, become a first lieutenant, and then 2 more years, you make captain. Then I forget how many years it is to major. And then as you get in the higher ranks, it starts to be a little competitive. If you're, really... I want to say really proactive, do a lot of additional duties, perform well in both your primary duty and your extra stuff, then you might get an early promotion. And then so maybe a year or up to 2 years early to a promotion, then you get the pay, but they're also kind of fast-tracking you to be in a leadership position. And then if you're just on time, like most guys are, 90% are just on time to their ranks, and then you'll be a lieutenant colonel at 20 years like I was, and then either continue, which you can, nothing says you have to get out, or go ahead and retire and then do another career like I did.
Now, excuse my ignorance. I know this much about Air Force or military.
Right.
Lieutenant colonel sounds fancy. What is it? How does it work?
So
what comes next?
And usually these positions the rank goes with a level of position. So amount of supervisory number of people that you are in control of or could be in control of. And along the way to get the promotions, there's usually some kind of in-house school, like captains usually go to squadron officer school. And then I think there was... I can't even rattle off the names. It ends up with like Air War College. And so the more you achieve, the more in-house school you go to, plus getting education outside. Like most officers, either to make major or once they become a major, go get a master's degree.
Got it.
So you're really not going to make lieutenant colonel unless you've gone outside, because they promote more education.
Right.
And mine was in public administration. So
Masters?
yeah, my master's was in public administration. So really, that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking public assets and I'm administering, military people who are paid by, the government to do.
Did it fit? Did it work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, at that point, it's about making larger decisions and managing people.
Wow.
So, people get a lot of guys go for some kind of master's in aviation because they're in aviation, so that's also useful.
Right.
But they want to see that degree and that progression. And then so by the time you finish the Air Force, lieutenant colonel, major jobs might be, captain job, you could be a minion. And in the flying world, it's different than, the non-flying community. We talked a little bit about that. It's like going in the Air Force, you'd think everyone wanted to fly.
Right.
But no, not everybody does. So you've got mechanics. We have some awesome mechanics to work on these jets.
That's true, yeah.
And when you're a major in the mechanics world, you've got a lot of people under you.
Whoa.
And when you're
move just a little forward,
yeah.
so it's
so when you're on the maintenance side of the house, you've got a lot of enlisted folk who maintain these aircraft, change tires, turn wrenches, do a lot of sophisticated tests on jet aircraft, and you have to manage them.
Whoa.
And not just their work performance, but their whole life.
Right.
And these are younger people too, so they have young people problems. They have problems at home with their family, paying all their bills.
And you're managing all that.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot for somebody who, if you're a major in the pilot side, you're a flight lead, you're an instructor, you might be a flight commander or a squadron assistant, like a DO, director of operations.
Huh.
So you would then manage parts of the squadron, and a lieutenant colonel can be a squadron commander.
Interesting.
So you may have the entire flight operation for a squadron. And then as you move up in rank, you might have a whole wing. That might be 3 squadrons. And then you move a little higher, and, you could, a lot of different things you could do.
Wow.
Large organizations that you could command as a general.
Lieutenant colonel. That's awesome. And you also have a degree in economics.
Yeah, that was my
first.
I got that out of UCLA. Yeah.
What was it about economics that got you?
We talked a little bit about this in the car.
Yeah.
I go, well, I'm going to climb that hill, but I don't know that that's the hill I want to climb. From there, I can see the other hills that I want to climb. So I really thought I wanted to be an engineer. But to get into UCLA, I'm like, well, I'll go to the School of Arts and Letters and do physics. Because they said, well, all the same courses.
Right.
So I go, okay, I'll do that. Well, once I got into, my first physics classes, I go, yeah, I like physics, but I wasn't really into particle physics. I'm like, this is, and the people I saw in it, I didn't identify with. So other people attracted to that, I'm like, I don't think I fit in. I'm the round peg, and these are all square holes. So, but one of my breadth requirements was an economics class. And I go, this is fascinating. Economics was not what I thought it was. You have a vision in your head of what this is. I'm thinking it's going to be spreadsheets and statistics and accounting.
Interesting. What is it?
And it really isn't. It's about human behavior.
Whoa.
It's about making choices. So when you study economics on a micro level, it's the individual. So like this time. So we slipped this, and you asked what I meant by slip. I go, move to the right, because we weren't going to do it on the 19th.
Right.
Well, you probably had a student come up.
Right.
So you had to weigh, okay, first of all, the student is a source of income. So
Right.
you're going to put a little cash in your bank, and you have an obligation to that student. You want to keep that student. So that has value. All those things have value. And then you've got me on the other end to do a freebie thing.
Right.
This is not making instant cash. So I have to weigh those two.
Right.
And the commodity you're going to apply is your time. So you went, okay, my time would actually be better spent with my student, and then I'll call Glenn and see if he can negotiate. So we negotiated this time. I'm doing the same thing. So I had to value this above going home early and taking the dog to the park because this is my day off.
Right.
So I go, okay, you know what? This is a one-time thing. I've made a commitment to you, so I value this more.
Right.
So it's not always about money. In this case, it's about time. And we learned about people making, well, obviously, any economic decision you make, you've got cash that you can do anything with. You could buy a car, or you could go on a vacation. You go, okay, the vacation's only going to be fun now, but the car will give me years of service.
The car is type 2 fun.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's going to enable a lot of other fun.
Right.
So you make that choice. Sometimes you got to choose between owning a car and riding the bus. And you go, well, let's see. The bus won't go anywhere anytime I need it to. The car will. Do I need that? If your life is very rigid, you go, you can get rid of a lot of other things if you get rid of the car. No insurance.
Right.
Everywhere you park it, you don't have to worry about people banging into it. The maintenance on it you can get rid of if you just ride the bus. Or Uber everywhere. There's people now who Uber everywhere. And when you look at this city versus New York City, New York has, one, more transportation. Two, it's really hard to park a car. So a lot of people choose to not own a car in New York City, and be hard not to here. Well, then we're getting off the subject, but that's economics. It's making choices.
It's not quite off the subject, because what this gets me thinking about is, because when you started talking about economics, my next question to you was, well, did any of that transfer to flight training? But now that you're talking, I'm like, it's all about flight training because it's human decisions.
Yeah.
It's
every
human
decision.
decisions.
Well, risk management.
Yeah.
So economics is to money, same kind of decisions, but risk management, okay, coming home from Hawthorne. Okay, I can go draw a straight line from Hawthorne to Deer Valley, or I can zigzag around and follow the Interstate 10. Now, during the day, if I draw a straight line, I'll get there faster. But I'm accepting some risk that, I only got the one engine, it quits, I got to have a place to put it. So, but during the day, I can see dry lake beds, roads, clear areas. Again, save myself first, and then if I can, save the aircraft. So as long as I can find an open place that I can land at a slow speed, I'm going to live. At night, different problem altogether. So it'd be good to be near a road and fly airport to airport to airport, connect the dots. That way I always have a place to land. So I'm managing that risk. During the day, it's worth it. Economic decision, I'll go straight. Less time, less gas, and I'll still survive that route.
Right.
At night, now it's too risky. I won't accept that risk. So I will accept the extra cost of flying over the I-10, connecting the dots, and even if I do, engine fails, I can't reach an airfield, I'll land near the I-10 where emergency vehicles can get to me faster than the search and rescue the next day to find me bled out.
In the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I love it. You mentioned risk management. Let's talk a little bit about that. From your personal take, risk management, how and why is it so vital for someone listening to this who doesn't fly airplanes? It's not a term discussed when it comes to driving cars, like just day to day.
It should be.
It should be.
Yeah.
But it's really not something that I came across or heard much of until I started flight training. Whether that's good or bad is a different topic. Why, for anyone listening or curious, why is risk management, and I think you alluded to it a little bit, such a big thing when it comes to being a pilot and flying airplanes?
And it's interesting the way the FAA is structured everything. Like sport pilot, you can take yourself out and one other person. 2 people, right? If you're a sport pilot rating.
Oh, I can only take one person.
Yeah.
Okay, I did not know that.
Limited to 2-person aircraft, smaller. So if it crashes into a house, it won't cause as much damage.
Just 2
it's
of
a
us.
maximum weight. I think it's 13-20 pounds. So as you graduate to more capable aircraft and can carry more people, now you've got to manage more risk, because you're not just managing the risk for yourself, you're managing the risk for everybody on board. So the FAA, apparently they don't care too much if you hurt yourself, because you can go fly an ultralight with no N number on your own. There's still an FAR that governs it, but you can do that willy-nilly all yourself. But once you start putting other people at risk, now they want to control it more, and they want you to have a higher, more training and a higher level of proficiency, like the 90-day thing. 90 days, let's face it, that's too long between landings anyway.
I'm with you.
But they've got a minimum. They've got a standard. But you can go a whole year and not have touched an airplane and go get yourself current with 3 landings. So they're okay with you hurting yourself, but once you can hurt somebody else, they want to manage that risk. So, yeah, you didn't hear about it in cars or even on your bicycle, but think about the things people do to manage risk on a bicycle. Well, you get a helmet. And, if skateboard, you put the wrist protectors on so you don't bust a wrist. So you take steps to mitigate the risk, because you go, well, on a skateboard, yeah, there's a good chance I'll fall down, and maybe I'll put knee protectors on. and maybe butt pads. I watch snowboarders. They're on their butt a lot, snowboarders. And so sometimes that's got to hurt. So they take steps to mitigate the risk, even though they're not, they didn't do a checklist, the risk management checklist. But we in aviation, we're used to checklists. And so you can run a risk assessment tool. So, or I think I've heard FRAT now, flight risk assessment tool, because maybe other endeavors are starting to use. Maybe there's a boat risk assessment tool. That would be a BRAT.
Right. A BRAT. That's funny.
But regardless, then you're doing a formal process. And I've seen people do this all the time. They start scoring their risk. Is it night? Is there weather? Is the runway wet? And so they're scoring it, and then they don't like the number at the bottom, so they change some of these. Well, that's not particularly useful. But at least the process makes them aware of the additional risk factors that they've incurred. They go, hey, according to this thing, we shouldn't go fly. Maybe we want to think about this.
Right.
Now, that's something before using paper tools like that or checklists. And I've seen students do this, is they'll call me and they'll say, oh, I hear that it's going to be really windy this afternoon. Maybe we shouldn't fly. And I'm like, well, it's calm right now. I go, it might pick up, but then we could just land. I go, if we're in the pattern. So I am more of the mind that I'll always show up at the airport. And then I'll stand on the ramp and look around. And I'll go, is it windy? Is this, can we mitigate this risk somehow?
Right.
Is there a perpendicular runway that's into the wind that we could use? And so once we've gone through, what do we want to do? What's our objective? And then I go, okay, how can we mitigate any risks that we have? If it makes sense, then we'll do it. And some things are variable. It's not an all or nothing. A cross country tends to be because you're going somewhere. So you have to assess that risk for the en route weather. But I go, okay, if I run into it and it's worse than I thought, can I land somewhere and stop?
Right.
And always land. I go, okay, nope, it's not nice yet. So we'll land here, get a cup of coffee, meet some nice people. There may be some good things come out of it, and then get back in. If you got time pressure, now that's another risk. They get their itis.
Right.
So, and that's where having a backup plan like an airline flight or a car would make sense. As part of your overall risk plan is if it gets bad, I can land in Palm Springs and I could take a Southwest flight to Phoenix.
Right.
Or, Uber the rest of the way.
Right.
Park the plane, I'll pay the money, because it's funny how people make decisions, I got to get there. I don't want to pay for overnight parking. I'm like, paying for overnight parking will be a lot cheaper than the funeral ceremony. That's
100%.
And in hindsight, that's clear. But so you got to actually, and I do this all the time, is you probably do too, is I read the accident report. Is when I'm about to do something, I go, okay, what's this accident report going to read like? And then when I realize they're pointing out things that I've already done or am about to do as increasing the risk as additive conditions or potentially causes of the accident, I go, okay, no, we're not going to do it.
I love that. I've never heard someone put it that way. So when you're about to embark on something that might be on the fence, you visualize and try and imagine what your own accident report might read. And if you're not 100% happy with the details, you say no.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Whoa.
I don't want that. I don't want anyone to write that about me. You go because how many times do you read accident reports? You read them all the time, right?
Right.
And you go, what a dumbass. You go, oh, look at they did that. And then, but you don't know the circumstances under which they did it. They went down the primrose path. They got led down that path. So it's hard to, you say you put yourself in their shoes, and I can see how they get from one step to the next step to the next step. And I go, I could do that, because let's face it, they were human, I'm a human. Any of us could fall for all the little tricks, and that's the accident chain, right? We could have broken the chain at any one of those spots. So, and here's another one. We were flying helicopters in Scottsdale, and Arizona gets thunderstorms in the summer.
Right.
So,
what is it? Buoys?
Haboob.
Haboob.
It comes from somewhere in the Middle East, but it'll create these huge dust storms.
Yes.
So the collapsing thunderstorms will whip up all the dust off the desert floor, and it becomes a wall of dust coming at you. And the visibility goes down, the winds get strong and unpredictable. So there was a thunderstorm off in the distance, a couple of them, and me and another guy, we're both older, and I think we were working on my commercial rating, and we looked at each other, and we went, I don't think we need to go fly. And what was funny was we stayed on the ground and we did ground. We hopped in the helicopter, moved all the controls. We did all the emergencies. So we simulated, everything you could that would require, moving some switches from memory.
Right.
So you build a little muscle memory. So that was useful too.
Right.
One guy, he did go out and fly, but he and I were both in our 50s, and he flew Apache helicopters in the Army, and I flew A-10s in the Air Force, and we were both in the Gulf War together at King Fahd Air Base, and which is really an international airport, but when we were there, it was an air base. Anyway, we looked at each other and went, yeah, we could fly, but there are so many beautiful, perfect flying days in Arizona that why would we choose this one to go fly?
Right.
I go, we can wait and fly another day. Now, if the weather's always like that, like you live in Kansas and there's all kinds of wind and weather going on all the time, then that might be actually an okay day. You're like, well, this is the best it gets. So we'll go ahead and fly, but we'll mitigate the risk some other way. Like we won't fly east because that's where the thunderstorms are. We'll fly west and then north. But they can pop up anywhere and move quickly. And when we looked at the day afterwards, like after the fact, we go, okay, we could have flown because that's a disappointing one. But if that same day and same set of circumstances happened 100 times, there might be 8 times that it wouldn't have been okay. Whereas on the next day when it's beautiful and clear and there are no thunderstorms, we could do that 100 times and it would have been fine all 100 times.
Right.
So why accept a 8 in 100 chance of having a problem when you can have 0?
Right.
So we chose 0 on that particular day, and that was it was definitely the right decision because it was good for us.
Yeah, and you'd rather, look back and say we could have done it than not have the ability to look back.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's...
So that's, risk assessment. And then there's another thing called risk and resource management, is that RRM, so you have risks, but you also have resources. So you can mitigate some of the risks. Like some of the simplest ways we do that are filing a flight plan. So if you go cross-country over, uninhabited terrain, there's a risk that even if you just land at, engine fails and you do a forced landing and the airplane is not flyable anymore and you're by yourself, you can be where there's no cell phone coverage.
Right.
People rely on the cell phone. It's not a satellite phone. It's a cell phone. You land in the middle of nowhere. There are parts of northern Arizona where there's no coverage.
Right.
And you can't reach anybody. And there's going to be a time factor. Whereas if you filed a flight plan, there's a time that they're expecting you to close that flight plan. And then for half an hour, they initiate a phone search. They start looking for you. They call the place you took off. They call the place you're supposed to land. They talk to flight service in the middle. Did he talk to anybody? And then they go, okay, we know he made it at least to here. So that'll narrow the search area.
Right.
And they'll start looking sooner. Whereas if you just show up missing, the first person that, say you're flying home and your wife's expecting you, oh, he just got delayed and he's late. So she'll sleep through the night, wake up the next morning wondering where you were, start making phone calls and get panicky. Then it's going to take a while before they realize, okay, he flew and is missing somewhere between point A and point B. So you've just delayed that search. Whereas, say you're injured and it's a time-critical injury, you could have somebody looking for you hours, maybe a day sooner.
Right.
And that may be the difference. So that's a risk mitigation tool is because the ultimate risk is dying.
Right.
So you could mitigate that risk somewhat by filing a flight plan.
Risk and resource
management.
I love it. And like flight following would be a resource.
That's a resource.
Yeah.
So, and all the ATC, well, just getting flight following on your flight.
Right.
That's a resource.
Right.
So single engine from here to Hawthorne, I run the risk of I could have an engine failure or some kind of in-flight problem. Well, if I'm already talking to ATC, think how it delays you if you've got to look up a frequency and tune it in and then get in touch with them. If I'm already talking to them, I can just say, hey, LA Center, I'm having some engine roughness. I am going to divert into thermal, and it's easy now. And so I can deal with the problem because the chances are if you're having an engine problem, you're going to deal with the engine problem first, but nobody knows you're having that problem now. Then you got to do all this coordination, whereas I can use this resource that I have. Hey, do you have the CTAF freak for thermal? Yeah, 122.8. And then poof, you go there. Hey, clear the pattern. I'm coming in on this runway and land.
Love it.
Or say if it's a towered airport, that even needs to grease the skids more. I'm going to land at Palm Springs. There's airliners and a lot of traffic, jets going into there, and I'm now having an emergency where I'm pointing right at it. I can go past, Palm Springs without talking to anybody, but I know there's a lot of air traffic, so that's a risk. and I mitigate it by doing flight following because they call out the other traffic to me. Okay? And then if I need to divert in there, I'm already talking to somebody. They'll hand me off to the tower, and the tower will say you're clear to land on any runway.
Love
Poof, land. So you can mitigate some of your risks by using additional resources around you.
I love that. I love that. And so that, I guess, to my question of why it seems so much more talked about in aviation is because I guess in aviation, unlike other things, the opportunity or the instances in which you have to mitigate risks come up so much more often than riding a bicycle, where maybe you decide to put a helmet on or off. In planes, it's every minute of every single flight.
Oh, yeah.
Potentially, I could have the need to make some decisions and mitigate some risk.
And the risk is greater.
Right.
So engine failure in a car, we just pull over.
Right.
Engine failure in an airplane, you've got more problems to solve. So
Right.
it's a lot more consequential, and the risk of dying. Now, you could die on the highway. People do it every day.
Right.
They're listening to the radio, they're texting and driving. They don't even realize, they're totally unaware of the amount of risk they're accepting when they get in their car.
Totally.
But it's funny, when people get in a plane, they're all wary, like they've got to be cautious because airplane accidents make the news. Car accidents never make the news.
Car accident reports.
No, there's no such thing.
I love it.
So when people get in their car willy-nilly, they don't put on their seatbelt, or they don't even think about it. But
Right.
airplane, because of the media, it gets more attention.
Right.
But, that's good, though.
It's a good
It should
thing.
spill over into the rest of the world.
Totally. Yeah, you'd think. Well, hopefully more. It's funny you say spill over, because I'm a believer that what makes a pilot is not someone who could manipulate the flight controls. Autopilots do a better job. So what makes a pilot, in my opinion, as someone who's taught a bunch of people how to fly, I think what makes a pilot is someone who is able to think in a certain way. It's the thinking.
I think you're right.
Using this box.
Oh, yeah.
And I do see, it's funny, but I see like some students of mine, let's say someone gets their private, there's very often that way of thinking spills over unintentionally into
Right.
other areas of their flight, and they go, oh wow, like now I see such and such differently. And that's always awesome for me to hear, because it's like, okay, this could be applied not only in an airplane, it could be applied everywhere, as it should. And so sometimes it does spill over, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
so.
pretty cool. I love it. So 20 years in the Air Force, and then what happened? Is that the amount of time that you need to retire, or?
Yeah.
I got it. So 20 years show up, and you tell yourself what?
Well, that's an interesting thing, too, because I had always had it in my plan to have some kind of flight school or do some flying endeavor on my own. Because here I've been, pretty much coddled by the Air Force in this confined, pretty structured environment.
Right.
And you fly their machines, you follow their rules. And it's not that I didn't want to follow rules. It's that you kind of, like you're doing with this.
Right.
You're your own boss.
Right.
Doing this. You
Right.
run something.
Right.
So there, it's a large machine, like working for any large corporation. You're a cog in the works. And I kind of didn't want to be a cog in the works, but I saw my friends going off to the airlines. And, an interesting thing happened around 9/11 is I had 14 years in the Air Force, which is kind of a point. So when I got in, it was a 7-year commitment. Now I believe it's a 10-year commitment after pilot training. They got to get their money back off of you.
So they got it in 10
So
years.
they keep you as long as they can get you to agree to stay, which I think right now is 10 years. But I stayed 7. Then there's been a pilot shortage as long as I've been doing this.
And then I want to talk to you about that, because I think it's something that's always been in existence, but we'll get there, okay?
Okay, but so they started offering bonuses to stay. So I go, I was going to stay anyway, so I'll take the bonus, which was a bad bonus that the way for them to manage it. They should have let people threaten to get out before they offer them the bonus. But I go, I'll take the bonus. So I took the bonus, and that got me through 14 years.
Right.
So I went, all right, now I'm at 14 years, time to posture to, hey, maybe I'll call it. I'll just go on to the airlines now. Because
Right.
seniority, you talked about seniority a little bit.
It's big.
It is big in the
airlines.
So I go, well, I'll go get my type rating. So I went and got my 737 type rating.
On your own?
Well, I used some of my education benefits, paid for part of it.
Nice.
But I went and got you had to have, for the airline I work for, you had to have it at the time.
Got it.
So I'm like, I'll go get my 737 type. And I did that in Phoenix at a little school. And then Then the weird thing happened is 9/11 happened. Well, I hadn't decided to get out yet, so that was a good time to decide not to get out because the general aviation and airlines in particular went the wrong way. They stopped growing because now there's all this risk. As we have these terrorists who can take out buildings with airplanes.
And this is what year?
That was 2001.
2001, you're thinking of going to the airlines, and the Twin Towers happened. That's a horrible time.
Yeah, so I didn't get out. I stayed in.
Right.
And a lot of my buddies who'd already gotten out and went to the airlines came back because now suddenly we've got this war in Afghanistan fighting terrorists, and we need more people. So we bring them back, and then the airlines needed fewer people, and so a lot of the furloughed guys came back to the military, which was good that they could, so they can continue to have an income. And then it was good, the airlines got rid of extra people they didn't need. And just like, this recent pandemic, we started having a glut of people and too many airplanes. Now it's worse than it was before.
Crazy.
Because to solve that problem, we let people retire early. A lot of people went off to do other things. And now we need them all back and then some. So, yeah, and you talked about there always being a pilot shortage. Potentially, yeah.
That's interesting because here's what I think. I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I don't know. But what I think, like yourself, I've always heard there's a pilot shortage. And if not, there's a pilot shortage, it's always coming around the corner, always. But I think it's one of those lines where every election's the most important election of your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just something that's always been said, but maybe not, because I wasn't listening to these things, 10 years ago. So I don't know. But from my perspective, talking with people, it seems like there's always been some talk.
Well, what's funny about a shortage is you can solve any shortage almost instantly. And so if they said, you know what, we need pilots, we're going to pay all pilots $1 million a year, there would instantly not be a pilot shortage. You would have everybody, flight training would be going like gangbusters. Every aircraft manufacturer, first they'd be building trainers. Right. Then now the only thing you can't create instantly like that is demand for travel.
Demand for travel, yeah.
So, well, anyway, let me back up one, so I'll just finish out. I didn't get out of the Air Force, and I did my last 5 years in the F-117, which is really a pretty good airplane as an airline lead-in.
What's the F-117?
That's the stealth fighter. The little black triangle.
Whoa.
So
wait a minute. So you did that alien-looking thing?
That one. Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know I'm sitting talking with someone who flew that.
I thought I put that on
You did, but I did not know that was that. You should have... If you want to speak my language, you should say I flew the black triangle, not the F-117.
Yeah, Darth Vader's helmet.
Holy cow.
I did that my last 5 years. And then you fly it with the autopilot. I mean, you could hand fly it, but
is it
for most
horrible,
of the mission...
not stable?
Oh, no. I mean, it's full fly-by-wire. So in theory, you can't fly it manually. But we don't even have a manual way to fly it because all the inputs are you move the controls... and then it creates a vote to the flight controls, and a computer guides it. So, but they built it to handle like any other A-10, F-15, F-16, roll rate, pitch rate. So you could get in it if you've flown one of those and fly it. It feels that way. So the computer moves everything, probably like an Airbus does, but I don't fly the Airbus.
Right. Whoa, so how different? What plane did you fly before the F-117?
I flew A-10s. I flew the A-10 in the Gulf War.
So how, from a pilot standpoint, how big of an adjustment in terms of aerodynamics or just flying an airplane is it to go from that to that crazy-looking thing?
Well, as you know this, so you got compartments in your brain for all your aviation stuff.
Uh-huh.
And things like takeoff, landing, en route, planning. So you just adjust all those numbers and parameters. So the A-10, I think we rotated around, 140 knots and flew. The F-117, you didn't rotate till 190.
Wow.
It didn't have flaps. So, and it was really kind of underpowered. It had two GE 404 engines, but without the afterburner. Same engine as the F-18, and then they modified the tail to spread out the heat source so that it would be less vulnerable to detection by infrared. So they spread out the exhaust, and that's where the thrust came out. But they reduced it. that takes it from, I think, a 10,500-pound thrust engine to a 8,900.
Why would they reduce the power? That thing seems
They didn't reduce the power. They just modified how the exhaust came out,
and it reduced
and that
reduced
reduced
the
power.
But why did no afterburners?
Heat signature, and the way you would have to construct the burner cans would reduce the stealth. Because a stealth fighter.
It's all about stealth.
So it was all about the stealth, and we'll make this thing fly anyway.
So as someone who's flown it and knows probably more about it than most anyone else, what was the number one goal with that airplane? It wasn't power, it was stealthness.
Yeah,
that was probably it.
It was the two features the airplane had were, we didn't call them stealth, we called them low observable. So you could still detect the airplane in certain azimuths and conditions, but it was very hard to detect. And if you had other airplanes flying around you that were easier to detect, the operator of any kind of radar would see those and not notice or not be adjusted to notice the F-117. So it could penetrate airspace undetected where other airplanes couldn't. So low observable, that was one feature. And then accuracy, precision. So we could guide a laser-guided bomb within a meter. So your little office here, we could hit this spot. You know, put a 500-pound to 2,000-pound bomb in the 20s to 30s, 1,000 feet. So we could fly over this at night, see this building, pick out this part of the building, and put a weapon here.
Whoa. So you're saying the low observability of it and the ability to do what you just described were the top two things that plane was developed to do.
Exactly.
I gotcha. And then all the rest was just okay. It's power and things like that. It was just like whatever.
It wasn't built to evade missiles. It was built to not even have them shot at them, to penetrate the airspace and leave undetected. Now, the thing is, after you've dropped a weapon, they know somebody was there. So then the goal was to leave their airspace without being shot at.
And I never thought of that. So the toughest part of a mission would be not penetrating the airspace, but leaving after you drop the bomb, because now you're made yourself known.
They know you were there. Yeah, and we usually employed that as a package of airplanes. So not just one. We'd have multiple airplanes from different directions, and we called it a simultaneous attack. We would drop all our weapons at the same time, so they'd have their biggest problem. And so airspace-wise, we had to have all these airplanes over the same target area, maybe a city, maybe a factory complex, all there at the same time, and no airplanes hitting each other, no bombs hitting each other, and no bombs hitting airplanes.
Whoa.
So we had computer programs to deconflict all of that, and then we could then all egress at the same time. And some of the bombs might be going after the air defense systems.
Right.
So that would make our problem of leaving less.
Incredible. How much attention did you guys get when you land that thing someplace?
Well, I went to the Point Mugu Air Show, and it was kind of a low weather day, so I wasn't going to do any loops because we didn't loop that thing. And I just zorched around the pattern for a little while, and nobody else, all the other air show acts were canceled, so I was it. I land and scoot off I didn't have a ladder, so I just scooted off the edge and went and shook hands in the crowd.
God.
So, yeah, it got a lot of attention.
People think you're like an alien in that thing.
Exactly. They would cordon it off because we wouldn't let people touch it because we didn't want them damaging it, but also the material on the surface is a radar absorbent material. And it was built by Lockheed Martin. They produced the stuff. It was interesting to when the factory got a tour, and they make it. Ever seen like fruit roll-ups?
No.
You never had a fruit roll-up? I guess those have gone out of vogue.
Like the candy?
Well, it's like on cellophane. You take a mash of apples, say, and spread it out. It's kind of like a thin gelatin. Then you roll it up, and then you can peel it off and eat it. Okay, so that's a fruit roll-up. That's what the radar absorbent material looks like when they make it.
Whoa.
So they mix it in a vat. It's got, the secret sauce in there I'm not going to talk about. Then they spread it out real thin, and then they squeegee it to get the exact thickness. But the edges all look kind of curvy and wavy. And then they would cut it to specific size. They'd square it off, and then now you have this material that you can glue to the airplanes are made out of aircraft aluminum. It's still a metal airplane.
Right.
And but then you would glue this to the side, and so certain wavelengths of radar would be absorbed by the skin, and other parts of it would be reflected off due to that. Remember how angular it was?
Right.
The goal was that the radar energy would go off in a different direction than back at the source.
Right. So it's not I shoot it and it comes back. Interesting. So some of it would be absorbed?
Some's absorbed and some's bounced off in a different direction. Yeah.
To evade the radar. Fascinating. That's incredible. I'm trying to picture you in that plane. I did not put the one-on-one together. That's how much I know about.
Yeah, I didn't realize you didn't know that. But not what you would call a pilot's plane.
Right.
It's like, this isn't an extra 300 that we're going to put, through the ringer. It has a mission, and we're putting up with all the other features of this plane that are really kind of crappy. High takeoff speed, low thrust, poor single engine handling characteristics. But once you got it going fast, because we'd fly, 0.78 to 0.85 Mach.
No speed of sound.
No, it was subsonic.
Got it.
But, we'd fly it relatively fast and deliver weapons from it. Doors open, bomb comes out, doors close, and then make a turn, go in a different direction for a while, and then another turn, and then evade. So that's what it was good at.
I love
it. As long as you kept your speed up, you didn't get slow and high, it wouldn't fall out of the sky.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that thing looks like it shouldn't be flying. So
no. Now they got the F-22 and the F-35, much prettier. I think it looked better on a poster.
Smaller.
People ask me, was the F-117 a good asset? I go, well, yeah, it was a great asset. And we kept improving it the whole time. It lasted over 25 years. It served the Air Force. But, better technology comes along. And then, of course, you want to keep your aircraft manufacturers in business, so you got to let them build new planes once in a while.
Yeah. Did you ever ask yourself how many alien spaceships reporting have I been responsible for in my life?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's funny. I really hadn't thought about that.
Think about it.
Every once in a while, I'm sure.
Yeah, someone sees you flying overhead and they give them a call. They say, listen, I want to report some aliens.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's Glenn flying up there.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that one before, really.
That's
People
awesome.
got used to it, I think, especially I flew out of Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico.
Got it.
So everybody was used to seeing the plane, yeah.
I guess in the area. I love it. So you do that for your last years in the Air Force, and then 20 years show up, and that's the mark where you say, okay, I could retire, everything's good to go.
Yeah, yeah. So the whole flight school idea, watching all my friends get airline jobs, I go, well, it looks like a pretty good way to go. So, talked to the wife and said, I can't see not doing it. And there's another thing about this, too, is it's not an all-or-nothing deal. I go, if I get a job with them, I can just walk away if I don't like it.
Right.
But you got to try it. I go, some people, they discount things before they've even tried them. And I go, well, how do you know? And, and then there's people who go to training for one airline, and they get picked up by another airline, and they walk right out and go over there. Mm-hmm. I know they've probably signed something, but the airlines know people do that. And it's a lot of competition now for pilots. So anyway, I knew that if it wasn't going to work out, I could quit. But I had a lot of friends who seemed to be having a really good time at the airline I'm at, and I went, I'll do that too.
And I'm assuming it wasn't the only airline you interviewed or applied for. You were like,
I actually got hired by Frontier. That was my practice interview. Buddy told me they were hiring. I'm like, I'll type in, put my application in, got an interview, and I found out a little later, got hired. I'm like, okay. But then, what is it that happened? Something happened. Well, they were doing pretty well, making profit. They were just Denver-based.
Right.
And suddenly they took a loss, and then they changed their planning. They backed off.
Right.
And so the class date I would have had was going to get slipped. And I had never said I never committed to a class. I said no, because I was still waiting for the results of my other interview. But you never want to burn a bridge.
Right.
So I left that open, and then I got hired by the other airline, and I go, okay, that's where I'm going.
Right.
And I never had to tell them no because they canceled my class. They basically stopped hiring. So if I had told them I was coming, they would have canceled me anyway.
Got it.
So don't think you're being rude to them, because they'll be rude to you in a heartbeat, right?
So when they said that, you're like, oh, shoot, okay, I'll find
Yeah, they're not going to go,
airline.
let's hire him anyway, even though we don't need any more people, because we told him we would.
I love it.
They'll just, sorry. I mean, in the middle of class, you might be right prior to your check ride, and you're going to get your type rating in a Airbus, and they'll go, nope, we're done. And they'll stop that, like, right prior to the check ride. I've heard of that happening.
Really?
It's like, can I pay for it myself? Nope. Sorry.
Yeah.
Because you're 99% done.
It's just numbers, yeah.
But when an airline's headquarters says, no, we don't need any more people, they just scrape those guys off. So if you're in class and you get a better offer, you go do it.
Yeah, totally.
Now, I didn't have that experience. I just did my training and stayed, and now it's 17 years.
Crazy. So talk to me about the transition from Air Force to airline. What do you remember struck you the most in terms of an adjustment, things I had to adjust to from Air Force life to airlines?
Well, that is interesting. Let's see. A lot of it's the same. There's a lot. I mean, I'm still operating an aircraft. There's still procedures, checklists, systems to know, and a job to do. But I go from, and this will happen to anybody, even if they've gone to a regional airline and you're a captain in your regional airline. Now you're going to go to the right seat of an airliner. So you went from being the king to being a minion. And so I kind of did that. You're at the top of your career in the Air Force. I'm in charge of stuff, and I'm a flight lead and instructor in the airplane that I'm in. And now I go to the right seat. So I still have first officers now show up, and I empathize. I go, I know that, you're king of the hill where you just came from, and you have a lot of great ideas. I don't mind input. And I was that way. I'm sure I was. When I sat in the right seat, I wanted to run the whole show because I knew I could.
Right, because you've done it.
But I'm in the right seat, and I got to put up with whoever's there. And they told us in training, that guy is not there. Your captain is not there because he's better than you.
Right.
He's there because he got hired before you.
Exactly.
A lot. So you go, well, he's just senior. So that's, you sit there. But he still has to meet the qualifications of that job.
Right.
So he knows what he's doing. He can make good decisions. They may not be the decisions that you would make, but this is a learning experience. So sitting in the right seat is a time to watch and learn.
Interesting.
But you are, and I tell first officers this once in a while, I go, you're the most important person on the plane right now.
Why?
You are the safety device because you will keep anything ultimately bad from happening. Because the captain, if he were by himself, all his ideas are great. Just ask him. So he's flying the plane, he's got it all set up, and he's missing something, but he doesn't know he's missing it.
Right.
But that guy's sitting there watching. Now, don't be hostile or nasty about it, but just watch. And then when the appropriate time comes, you make a really good input. It's like, well, that won't work because the NOTAM said the glide slope was down, so that approach won't get us below minimum. Oh, I missed it. He didn't know he missed it. And that's why 2 guys is safer than 1 guy, but both guys checking everything. So, and the FO, the first officer, has all the responsibilities of the captain in a secondary role.
Right.
So, and I can't tell you. So, obviously, I have input when I see, and we take turns. So, one leg is the captain's leg. He flies, and then the other guy monitors. We used to call it pilot flying and pilot not flying.
Now it's monitoring.
Yes, pilot flying and pilot monitoring. And I like to say pilot monitoring and pilot monitoring the pilot monitoring, because once you got the autopilot hooked up, you're a monitor.
I love it.
But so yeah, that guy's doing all his stuff, but this guy's doing it all in the secondary role and can catch things. So I'm always grateful when first officer catches things. Now I catch things, and I have my own bedside manner that I need to correct things in a nice way too. Because if I'm a jerk about it, 1, he won't want to fly with me again. 2, he probably won't fly as well.
Right.
So if it's not super critical and I see a technique that, it'll work, but it's not great, I'll wait till later. But if I see something going on right now that is unsafe, then I got to say something right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about this. I was talking with a cargo Fly 747s pilot. We're talking just about, pilot hiring and just being a pilot at that level, at the level that you're at. And he was saying something which I'm sure you'll agree. He said, you know what, y'all, at this stage in our flying career, we can all fly the jet.
Right.
He said, I think we were talking about like what airlines look for. And really what it came down to is like we were talking about before, it's using your box up here, having the awareness and the ability to figure out an effective way to work together for the completion of this common goal.
Yeah.
And it's from what you're saying, it's from both sides, first officer or captain, everyone could fly the plane.
Right.
And what it comes down to is not only when I'll bring something up, but how.
Yes.
There's a lot of that goes into it. How much of this is a part of your day-to-day job? It's probably more than flying the airplane, because flying the airplane is the easy part.
Well, And we're talking first officer. I got flight attendants in the back,
Right.
who are crew members also, and they're very important,
Right.
because if I didn't have them, I can't carry 175 people, because I can't deal with everything that could go on back there.
Right.
People think, oh, they're serving drinks. That's just something they do to kill time, if you want to be honest. The airline thinks it's a revenue thing too, and it's a brand thing where we take care of people in the back, so they want to come back and they have a good experience. But if there's a life-threatening situation in the back,
Your door's locked.
well, my door is locked, but even if it was open and I could go back there, then who's flying the plane?
Right.
Then now you've only got one dude flying the plane. You need two people operating the aircraft completely while they deal with the things in the back. And now we've got to communicate back and forth. So, but when I show up, someone said this, and it's mostly true, is the captain sets the tone and the first officer sets the pace. Now, that's kind of for the cockpit, but it's also for the whole plane, is I set the tone.
Interesting.
So when I show up, I don't get real formal on them, and my airline tends to be a little less formal, but being human beings, I don't want to create a barrier to communication. I want to be as open as I possibly can, and I want to make it clear to them that I value their input, and I want that, and that I will do everything I can to take care of them and make their lives better. If the temperature's wrong, if it's bumpy, they'll be sitting, and I'll have the people sitting. We're going to do everything as safely as we can.
Right.
I love when people say on the PA, we're going to get you there as safely as we can. I forget, what's that mean? I don't. We get through there, we're going to get you there safely.
Safely.
We're either going to do it safely or we're not going to go.
Right.
And but anyway, setting the tone for the whole crew so that we're all on the same sheet of music, shared mental model, we like to call it, where everybody's got the same picture of this flight from takeoff to landing and how we're going to operate the plane in a safe way. And then get it 0 knots at the right gate. That's the goal. 0
knots at the right gate with no, one of the pilots I was talking to said it's a great flight if at the end of it we didn't have to write anything up and we didn't break any laws.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I like reuse the equipment.
Yeah, reuse the equipment. That's incredible. So there's so much to unpack when it comes to the airlines, specifically as far as adjustment is concerned. So it sounds like pretty much other than seniority and this whole idea of, I guess being thrown on reserve in the beginning must have been an adjustment from the Air Force.
A little bit. But and going back to that question that you asked, one adjustment I had, again, was I'm sitting in the right seat and I can run the whole thing, but I flew single-seat airplanes. So that was an adjustment, was having a person sitting next to me, and the only way I could kind of take what I already knew and transfer it to what I'm doing now is we're wingmen. So in the Air Force, you'd have 2 airplanes and 2 dudes, and we'd talk over the radio, and we'd coordinate our plan and do it. In the airplane, we're basically in close formation here, 2 feet apart, and we've got a plan together, and I'm the supporting guy, and so we'll do his plan. I can make a little input. He ultimately decides, and now I support that plan. And I'm either the flying pilot or the pilot monitoring, but whatever I'm doing, and anything I want to change in either seat, I always say, so here's what I'm thinking of doing. I verbalize my plan and then get some feedback.
And this is today in your airline operation?
Anything I do. I'm like, well, I think we should do this because. Or if that guy's doing something and he hasn't verbalized his plan, I go, so I'm not judging, but why are you doing that thing? And so many times I get a really good answer explaining from his previous life why this technique he's using is a good one.
But he was wrong for not bringing it up first to you.
Maybe. He may have made the assumption that I was familiar with that technique.
Got it.
So I'm not going to call him wrong. I'm just going to say I wasn't in the loop.
Got it.
So, but if he had said, hey, I'm doing this technique because, you got to be careful also, because you said everybody can fly the airplane. You don't want to be too instructional. So if he starts providing me instruction, it might hurt my feelings a little bit. But maybe I need it, right?
You're a captain, yes.
We never stop learning. And there was a guy about to retire, and he said, yep, he flew his last flight. He goes, I wasn't sure it was going to happen, but I learned something even on my last flight.
Whoa.
Because you literally learn on every flight and from each other because you have different experiences. It doesn't matter that you're senior. I hate the idea that, well, I'm senior, so I know everything, and you're the junior aviator.
Crazy.
That's just wrong. You're both seasoned aviators sharing this experience. You're only sitting here because you've been here longer. But it does pay. People are people, and you talked about this being the major portion of my job is doing things in a way we have to treat each other kindly. And I remember the old golden rule, treat other people the way you want to be treated. But that's not always just right, because you may have different standards for how you want to be treated.
Interesting.
Treat people the way you think they would like to be treated.
I like that.
So usually go in a little gentler, because they may not be as hardened as you are.
I like that's it's so interesting, because I love what you just said. I very often in life found myself complaining to myself, dang, why can't people be more straightforward with me? I love that, because that's how I am.
But you are.
Yeah.
And maybe they are not.
And they are not. And so I need to remember that actually some people, I don't want to call it, beating around the bush, but maybe some people need a little more gentle. But when someone gives me a no, or no and here's why, this is crazy. I love that, because I sit there and I go, God, this is so rare that someone could give me a straight answer, because I see all through but that's how I am.
Right.
And it doesn't mean other people want to be that way.
Yeah.
And so that's so interesting. How much about being a first officer at the airline? So you are a first officer, now you're a captain. How much about from being a first officer did you learn about how to treat your first officers now? How much of that, meaning I guess it's kind of obvious that having spent years as a first officer, you sit there as a first officer and go, as a captain, I'll never do this. As a captain, I'll never do this to my first officers.
Right.
As a captain, I'll never do this. Now that you're a captain, how much of that actually lived to be true, or is being a captain an animal that is completely different from what you thought it would be when you were sitting in the right seat?
No, I mean, all that time is valuable, sitting in the right seat. Now I know at some of the airlines you can upgrade pretty quick. And I'm like, wow, those guys are upgrading to captain. They're going to have a little bit of blinders on, because they won't have seen a lot of examples.
They haven't have experienced even as many bad experiences with captains, which looking back could be valuable in terms of how you'll treat others.
Those could be more valuable. Now, obviously, I had the examples of, I really like the way this guy does everything. I'm like, oh, I'm keeping that, and that, and I'm putting them in my bag. And as I go along, everything I see, I'm putting that in my bag that I like. And then, obviously, I show up certain days, and there's some people who earn a reputation and as not being the greatest to fly with. And I will always fly with somebody once. I'm like, okay, I'm warned. I know it. There was the trash bag guy. One guy,
trash bag guy. So
you develop a lot of trash on the flight deck. No one would ever think of this either. It's like in your Cirrus, you set up a trash bag.
In the Cirrus, no, but there was no food in the plane and no nothing. So
you didn't need one.
You didn't need one.
But we have food on. We don't have a lot of food on the plane. But if you bring your own food, you create trash.
Right.
And also the paperwork. So get a dispatch release and a weather packet and a crew list and a FAR 117 legality statement, and then you get a sheet that shows all the single engine procedures. There's a lot of paper, and it's good for one flight, and then after that flight, that all goes somewhere, and then you get a whole new set of paper. Now, it's nice because if you're a charter guy, or you got to go print all this paper in the FBO. Luxury at an airline, they just hand it to you. Now, eventually, I'm sure we'll go to like all electronic on an EFB, but until that happens, I have an EFB, but we're still getting it all in paper.
Physical paper.
So that stuff goes in the garbage, as well as all the food wrappers and drink cans and everything else. So there's the trash bag. Well, we had an individual, and he thought, because you can see the trash bag behind the center console down the aisle when the doors open.
Right.
He thought that was unprofessional. So he would brief you. He'd say, hey, we don't want a trash bag because it looks unprofessional, so you keep your trash over there and I'll keep my trash over here. At the end of the day, we'll combine it, put it in a bag, and it'll go. Well, somebody already told me, oh, yeah, you're flying with the no trash bag guy.
No, was he was a captain?
Yeah, he's a captain.
Okay, yeah.
So I show up, and I instantly don't get a trash bag. And I see him, and he goes, well, Glenn, and he looks around, and he goes, well, I see you didn't get a trash bag yet, but I don't like to have a trash bag. And then he goes into his spiel about why.
And you knew to expect this.
And I'm okay with it. And then it was interesting because I would fly with him, and then second time, no trash bag. I just didn't do it. I had my own. Then the third time, I still had no trash bag, and he had changed. And what happened was we went from having our own set of Jeppson's plates to the company providing Jeppson kits on the flight deck already. And he says, well, they got that Jeppesen kid over there, and it takes up amount of space, so I've decided you can go ahead and have a trash bag. And I think he just got tired of being the trash bag guy.
Yeah.
So I went and fetched the trash bag, and then it was all fine. But he had a reputation. I liked him. A lot of people didn't like him because he was a little instructory and preachy.
Sounds like it.
A little bit. But he's also kind of a funny guy and a really nice guy.
Yeah.
So I could fly with him all year long, and other people just didn't want to.
But that's an example of when I feel bad for the person, because I don't think those type of people are even aware of the trail they're leaving behind as far as how people are left feeling. I don't think he's a bad person. I don't think he's even looking to make people feel that way. But when people have a reputation, those types of people, he doesn't show up knowing he's going to be that guy. He is just who he is.
He is. That's true.
And so that's kind of what makes it sad and kind of sweet at the same time.
Well, and that's an interesting thing you brought up there, because now the examples of what not to be, him, I didn't consider that. But there were other examples, people who were very curt and gruff, sarcastic. There was a thing in the military where training by fear, sarcasm, and ridicule, and that's just rude. But you over the time in the military, you develop a thick skin, and they flip it to you, you flip it right back. No big deal. And we all knew where we were coming from. Then in the GA and civilian world, not everybody has experienced that.
Right.
So if you come in with that as your method of operation, you can melt people. It's just not good for them. And you're not going to get any performance. You're going to get the cold shoulder. And what one guy say goes 10 and 2, looking out the window the whole time, not talking to each other, which, sterile cockpit, that's not a bad thing. However, lack of communication, two-way communication, if you don't chit-chat a little bit, there can become a barrier to important conversation
100%.
About the plan for, around weather, conditions, the equipment, malfunctions. You maybe won't work together as well as a team if you don't already have that rapport. So, but there's a thing, and I finally read it. A captain clued me in on it, because we all do this. You can be the best person in the world, but if somebody treats you badly, wall goes up, and then arrows come out, and you might start slinging a couple of your own because it makes you feel better to defend yourself. Nobody wants to be beat up.
Right.
So we all want to defend ourselves a little bit. So you would notice the passive-aggressive come out a little bit. Is you're sitting in the right seat and someone's being mean to you. You know what? I see that he has, and this is bad for safety too, is you see a problem going on. Well, I could say something now and it will avert all things, and it's not going to crash the plane.
Right.
But I see it and I go, well, that'll be awkward if I let him get to this point, and then he'll discover it himself. Or he'll look bad in front of me, and then I'm not big on that, and normally I would never do that. But I see it coming, know I can do it, and then I don't do it. But other people, I've been making mistakes, and apparently I crossed them somewhere, or some people sit there wishing they were sitting in my seat, and they're resentful. Like,
whoa, yeah.
Because one guy said to me, he goes, Glenn, it's not just bad captains. He goes, there's some nasty FOs too, and I went, yeah, it makes sense. Where would the bad captains come from? But here's the deal. He said, some people, like you had said, can't help it.
Yeah.
They just can't help it. So he clued me in on this book. It's called Nasty People, and the author is Jay Carter. And I say that out loud on purpose so people will look it up.
Yeah, go get it.
The poor guy, not poor guy, but he was a psychology major. He was a psychologist, acting psychologist. He's working on his PhD, and it was his thesis for his PhD. That's all in the book. And in the preface, he says he didn't even want to write the book, but his college professor said, you need to write this down. You've discovered the cure for cancer in the social world here. And he identified these people as, he called them invalidators. And so you're flying the plane, and they keep pointing out all your mistakes in a hostile way. But And I found it very punitive when people would do that, and it would just bring me down. It was one in particular. Finally, I'm exasperated. I'm like,
oh my God.
And we got to the gate. I saved the gate. I go, hey, you know what? It's just too much. Oh, am I correcting you too soon? I go, no, it's just too much. I'm pretty new, and I cannot absorb all the information you have. Well, the thing is, he was boosting himself up at my expense. But the real kicker is they don't know they're doing it. And just like you said, somebody doesn't know they're developing a reputation. They can't help it. 95% of the time, they don't know they're doing it.
They don't know.
And they can't help it. And this guy who was a psychologist, he said he had a woman that he was treating, and her husband was that way to her. And he kept working with her, He was the one that needed the work. And ultimately, she committed suicide.
Oh.
Because it was such a caustic, hostile environment that she lived in.
Right.
She couldn't take it anymore. And that was part of what inspired him to finally write this book, to write it down. He's written several books since then.
Nasty People.
So, Nasty People by Jay Carter, and you have these people who are invalidators that boost themselves up at your expense. But what happened is, after I read the book, then I could recognize the behavior. And instead of feeling hurt and defending myself, I realized it wasn't really my problem, and he wasn't really being mean to me intentionally.
Right.
He couldn't help himself.
He couldn't.
So,
which doesn't make it right.
No, it doesn't make it right, but I would watch it, and then I would mitigate the problem myself without doing it back, because that's another risk, is doing it back, and you'll fall into the same trap. Is you can't do it back and just understand it and tolerate it. And then, you know what? Maybe in the future, find a way to trade out of that trip or not fly with that person.
Yeah, that's just part of it.
Ultimately, you would like to think they would get it. Maybe you can, in a nice way over dinner, say, you do this thing pretty regular, and it's kind of hurtful. And they might get it, or they might not.
That's tough. That's so much easier said than done,
yeah.
I think, when it comes to...
Yeah, you talked about it being we all fly the plane, but it becomes very personality-driven. And your goal should be, one, keep it amenable. Two, you want to be like the dynamic duo. You want to be an awesome team.
Right.
And so have open communication and draw on each other's strengths and operate the plane, obviously, in a completely safe manner, and then go to dinner, and drinks the next night and have a big yuck and the fun.
Right.
And it would be type 1 fun and type 2 fun.
Type 1 and type 2.
Yeah.
I love it. Tell me this, as far as an FO and a captain, did you find, having sat in both seats, that the line at which you will not risk management, but you're managing, I guess when you fly in a crew, there's a line which you tell yourself, unless we cross that line, I won't say anything for the better sake of our energy and environment in the cockpit. But once we cross that line, I will say something, because now that might take precedence over how we feel mushy with each other.
Right.
Have you found that line? And if so, like, how is that line different being an FO or from a captain's perspective? Because I'm sure you have the line in both seats.
Right. Oh, you've identified an exact thing that is out there, and it moves from day to day, and obviously it depends on the person. So, and you can be wrong. We're wrong all the time. When you cross that line. And I've had that line crossed on me. I'm like, ooh. And sometimes I'll just verbalize, that was a little hurtful the way you said it, but you're right, I'm messing that up. So the more open, frank, and honest you can be, basically with yourself and people around you, for yourself, that's the easiest. Now, the other person, you can't control those personality features. So you've got to kind of feelers, right? But if something's wrong, you know what the best way to do it is with a question. Instead of, hey, that's wrong, which I've also done, as, like, why is that switch there? And then they explain it to me so I can understand if it's a mistake or a misunderstanding.
Interesting. So you diverted the topic from pointed at them to pointed at the switch.
Well, I don't know if I did that, but yeah, so I asked the question about the switch because they obviously are in control of that switch. It's theirs. And I want to see if they meant to do that, because that's a different thing than if they go, oh, crap, thanks, and they move the switch, then I know it was just a mistake.
Right.
Right? And that was my job to catch it. And the same thing goes for them when I've got stuff wrong. But if they go, oh, well, that's there because umpty, and I go, I think maybe you missed this thing in our procedures that says when we do this procedure, that should be there.
Right.
And then they disagree with me. Then I go, okay, we'll look it up later, but would you just have it here while we start the motor, and then once the motor's started, we'll move it, and it'll be fine. And then at the gate somewhere else, I'll look it up. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the procedure changed.
Right.
So we'll look it up together, and then I go, no, it says right here that particular thing I'm talking about is pretty common, and it's usually there's in general no repercussions from it, not a safety thing,
right? But
it's a poor operating practice to do it that way. So, and they wrote it down in our manual to do it a different way. So once I show them that, they're like, oh man, I didn't even read that. Well, they hid it in the, we must have 4,000 pages of manuals to read. And once you went to the iPad, I go, well, they can go to 8,000 pages and it doesn't get any heavier.
It doesn't get any heavier. That's so funny.
So there is a lot to read and a lot to know. And I have people point stuff out to me all the time.
You're learning
And
things.
I'm like, okay, that changed. I didn't know it.
Right.
Because, it's hard. And at my age, every time you poke a new piece of information in, another piece of information comes out the other side and I don't know what it was. So I've now forgotten something and I don't even know I forgot it.
Right.
And then they pointed out to me. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I learned something new and that fell out.
That's so funny. So it sounds like in a perfect world, if you had to build the perfect pilot team, captain, first officer in a flight deck, it would be two individuals who left their egos at the door, who their sole common shared goal and purpose was to conduct this flight from start to finish safely and efficiently. And mistakes will be made, things will be forgotten, comments will be said, but none of it will be taken in a way of you're looking to get me. We're just looking to better what it is we're doing together. It sounds like that's the goal.
Yeah,
at the end of the day.
You summed that up very well. That is exactly right.
And the closer two people could get to that, the better a given operation, the funner it will be, the smoother it will go.
Yeah, if you could hire 10,000 of those clones, then you'd be good to go.
Got it. So,
and
you
got real people, so
right.
That is the goal.
That's the goal.
Good luck.
So the goal is to get closer, and that's where CRM comes in, and that's where, again, I want to make sure we talk about this too, it's just pilot hiring. And I'm assuming that's really what the focus is on. Everyone could fly the jet, but we want to hire people who might not even be designed to get along with all people, but might have the brains to figure out a way to make the trip bearable.
Right.
Bearable.
Yep. That is very much the case. And so people watching this, thinking about going to their airline interview, you're evaluated from they give you a must-ride pass to get on their airplane to fly to their interview. The moment you show up, you're on display. So know that. So the way you treat the flight attendants when you get on that plane, like, hey, where's my coffee? Hey, I wanted 2 equals, not 1. Like, no, don't do that. Be as nice, golden rule, but be as nice as you can from the moment you show up, because your interview starts when you show up at the gate on that non-rev flight to your interview.
People are looking at you.
Yeah. And then, at the hotel, at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, they're watching you because of what you just said, this getting along thing. Because when you look back through history at all the major aircraft accidents, you would find most of them there was some kind of personality element between the two guys or the one individual. It usually wasn't a switch or, look at the Lockheed L-1011 that went into the Everglades for a landing light or the indicator light. The wheel was safe, but here they were misplacing priorities, and there was an attitude involved. When you look at the transcript of the tape, Tenerife accident, you had a very senior guy kind of in control. It wasn't the relationship you described where it's mutual, and you default to the safe thing. FO told, hey, no, I don't think we're clear for takeoff. Yes, we are. And, it cost a lot of lives. If it had been a more amenable relationship where, okay, if you're not sure, we won't go.
Right.
And we do this all the time, is ask again, and I heard it plain as day, but I will ask again, are we clear for takeoff? Are we clear position, line up and wait?
You can't clarify enough.
Well, it can get annoying, so everyone needs to listen up. So, if you're yapping below 10, taxiing around, you're missing stuff, you're doing it wrong. So you do need to listen up, and there are times when things can be confusing or there are distractions, so there are times when clarification is necessary. But most of the time, you should get it on the first try, but if you don't, better to make sure you got the right thing. But yeah, the personality thing, and you're doing your interview, and you're in your interview. I remember my interview, man, we brought up a couple topics. You wouldn't think that the death penalty would come up on an airline interview. So, here in Texas, we got old Sparky. What do you think about that?
Oh.
And I went, that's kind of a sticky wicket. How am I going to, it had nothing to do with anything to do with flying. And if you're the type of person that, holding below 10,000 feet, you got to do that. We have a line-oriented interview where you're sitting in a cockpit mock-up and dealing with a problem. Well,
this is on the interview.
Yeah. So it's a separate part of the interview. But if you spit out the rules for holding, great, you know the rules for holding. But what's your philosophy?
What do you mean
And
by philosophy?
So, okay, 265. I don't even remember the max holding speed because I'm never even close to it.
Right.
And I'm like, well, let's see. I want to save gas, so I'm going to pull it back to L over D max, which is right around 200, and I'm going to save some gas. So, because I'm holding. And, that's bottom line is fuel, and it's also time, where maybe the weather get better, I make it to the destination. Whereas if I hold at 265, which is silly, so I know the rule.
So I may be legal, but it might not be the best.
And you might want to explain that thought process, but they're trying to get inside your head.
Yeah.
Like you said, this computer is how does it function? Is it just do everything just barely within the rules? Or is it, use some smarts, massage the problem? So they're looking, and the interaction thing. So they're looking to see how you interact with them. And so treat them like a person, answer the questions normally like you would. And it's hard because here you are on display. It's, hey, I'm in my interview. I want to seem, full up and, like a shiny penny.
Right.
And I'm going to be and you get a little uptight. And it depends on the airline. Maybe they like that. Don't know.
Right.
There's Delta with the rocking chair and the straight chair. You ever heard that?
No.
I think that's a thing they used to do. It's folklore. But they would put in the room, they had a rocking chair and a straight chair, see which one you sat in. And I have no idea what the criteria was.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, they had all kinds of little things they were looking at, and they also had the written psych eval and a lot of other hoops to jump through. But to identify certain
there are so
personality characteristics, and I have no idea what the goal was there. But get past that, be yourself. And but as far as preparing goes, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting the gouge, finding out what questions they ask, reviewing them, because I know that even though I want you to cheat and I don't want you to lie and I don't want you to give me other people's answers to these questions, but if you haven't even become familiar with the questions, I'm not sure how badly you really want this job.
Right.
If you show up and use to one of my questions that I ask all the time and say, God, I really haven't given that any thought. I don't know. That's not a very good answer.
Right.
Have something.
Right.
Yeah,
it's almost like not having read the Wikipedia page of the company you're going to interview
Exactly,
for.
yeah.
At least know what year we were founded.
Exactly. That would be good. And you brought up something else there. But stories.
What do you mean?
Have stories. Everyone, from day one on flight training, you have stories. One of my favorite stories is off the coast here in California is I'm flying with Miran Megardici, my first flight instructor, getting my 10 hours before solo. And, ocean breeze and, buildings and hills. And it's California. I'm trying to remember what time of year is fall. And we're bouncing around like this. And I'm fighting it. And I got my hands on the yoke and I'm keeping the plane straight and level. And he goes, let go of the controls. And I let go of the controls and it instantly got smoother. And he goes, see, it is all the student. So I have that story. And I tell that story when people are manhandling the controls. I go, let go. I go, you shouldn't have a death grip.
Yeah.
Just touch
Finger,
it.
yeah.
And I go, if it's all trimmed up, shouldn't take much pressure.
That's so funny.
Anyway, but that's my let go of the controls.
Where was he from?
I think it's Armenian.
That's awesome. Let's go of the controls.
Yeah.
And he taught you, you know what? But it's funny how those moments stick with you. Certain things flight instructors tell you, like I was sharing before, it will stick with me forever.
Yep.
It will stick with me forever.
Yeah,
That's
but have
crazy.
a lot of stories when you go to interview, and have a story. Well, for each of the questions you see that you might get asked, it's tell me about a time that. Tell me about a time that this happened. Tell me about a time that you disagreed with a captain. Tell me about a time that you broke a rule and what you did. That one, come up with a rule that was, not, well, I flew under a bridge. That's not a good one. First, don't go flying under any bridges. But if you did, I would recommend you kind of pick a different story.
Yeah. Find a rule that you broke unintentionally and then found out later it was a rule.
That's a good story.
I didn't mean to break
Didn't
a
realize.
rule.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was a thing. That's incredible. So we could talk for days, and I hope
Sure.
you come back on. But in starting to wrap things up, let's talk about where you're holding today, and then how people get a hold of you. So you're from LA, but you live in Arizona,
right? Yeah, Phoenix.
So where do you fall with flight training and things like that? Because how do you manage the airline? What's your general
schedule
like?
So I've got my airline schedule. And, I tell my tax lady, I said, well, if I need more money, I'll just go down to the airport with my money shovel and get some more. because that is the environment we live in
That's
right
what
now.
it is, right?
And at my airline, it's kind of always been that way. They rely on, I would say, we're the most productive pilot group there is. And
I hear that.
people put in for open time, and lately it's been at time and a half. So that's the money shovel. I don't like being on reserve.
Right.
And even picking up open time, you're waiting for the phone to ring. You're waiting for a text message that you got an assignment. You bid on it, but you don't know if you're going to get it. So there's a lot of people give away their flying. We have a whole trading system. You can give away, trade with the company. So I will get my basic schedule, and I'll look at the spaces. It has a lot of spaces because it's 3 or 4 days a week of flying based on what you bid on your seniority. And so, the first guy gets his first choice. Second guy gets maybe his first choice, but not if the first guy wanted it.
Right.
Then he gets a second choice, and so on down the line. So I get what I get, and I bid L.A. I'm a little more senior in L.A. than I would be in Phoenix. And then I look at people's giveaway. I go, well, after we've gotten our schedules, people can pick what they don't want to do, and they put it in giveaway. And they may be giving away because they've got a family event going on that week, and they would like that time off, or they just want to clear their schedule and only pick up open time, things the company needs flown at a moment's notice, but it pays more. So they choose to do that. Well, it's great to have flexibility, but I like to know when I'm flying so I can produce a schedule of availability for my outside students.
Right.
So I'll get my schedule, I'll fill in the blanks of what I'm comfortable doing, but I still have days off, and then I build a schedule that I allow people to sign up for.
Got it.
To fly my Citabria or my helicopter. And then sometimes it's empty. So in February, I had a lot of empty space. So that's just time I spend hiking with the wife and the dog or, doing something else.
Love it.
And they fill in, and I write them in. And they're clients, but I try to treat them like friends, and we're flying buddies.
100%.
They pay me money, and I don't make a profit yet.
100%.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's the flight training is not, and you have helicopter and
the airplane
tailwheel.
Yeah. So I was telling you, so my wife got a little antsy about the prices of helicopters. So the first time around, I said, well, how about I start with an airplane? So I did. I found an airplane really local, right on my field at Deer Valley. And so when I finally closed on the deal, and I took off, and I taxied out from the south side, took off, and then landed and poked it in my hangar on the north side.
Whoa.
It's the easiest aircraft acquisition imaginable.
That is crazy. So same runway, you took off and landed.
Well, they got 2 runways, so I landed on the north runway and then taxied back and put it in my hangar. I go, that's easy. The helicopter, completely different. Middle of COVID, got a good price because nobody had any money because the markets had all dropped, and I still had cash. So showed up, test flew it. Agreed to buy it. Wife got upset. Then came home, did arrangements to close on the deal, and I went back out to Jacksonville, Florida, with my mask on. And it took me, it's 1,600 miles at 80 knots.
You flew the helicopter back.
Yeah, I flew it.
Whoa.
So 80 knots. Flew it to its annual because I already arranged to do an annual on the helicopter, and then went back and got it. Then I flew it to south of Dallas. And in between all these, I go do work for my company. So flew it for 2 days, and then I went and flew around.
As an airline pilot.
Yeah, as an airline pilot. Then I would non-rev back, picked it up from the annual, flew it to south of Dallas, did some training, then flew, then went back and got it, and then I flew it to Big Springs, Texas. Don't put that on your holiday list. It's a funny little place. It sounded nicer than it turned out to be.
Springs sounds nice.
I would have gone to Midland, but Big Springs had cheaper gas, so that's what I was basing it on.
Right.
And then from there, I parked it in El Paso for a couple days, and then it took about 7 days of flying, about 2 or 3 legs a day. Well, the first day was 6 legs because I had a buddy, so I couldn't take as much fuel.
Whoa.
So we did little 1-hour hops.
Does it have autopilot?
Oh, no, it doesn't even have a correlator. You don't know much about helicopters, but this is a 1978 Enstrom.
So it has nothing.
It's manual throttle. So as you raise the collective, increase pitch of the blades, we know that makes drag. You got to roll on throttle to keep the blades from slowing down.
Whoa.
And it's all manual. So that's the fun bit of it.
Makes you a better pilot.
Just like the Citabria. So both my aircraft require a little extra skill to fly, I think, and that's what I like about them. Because I don't necessarily want to do a lot of primary instruction, at least in the airplane. That's for doing tailwheel, aerobatics, upset recovery, those kinds of things. And then spin training, I've done that for a couple of CFIs before they go take their check ride.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, what did you spin for your private?
172.
And they don't like to spin.
They don't.
It was a lot of work. You got to jazz the throttle, kick left
you
rudder.
yank it.
Oh my God! And maybe you get a turn and a half out of it.
Yeah.
But my Citabria, it'll spin all the way to the surface if you want to. It just, you enter, it's nice crisp entry, and over you go. You can neutralize the controls, and it keeps spinning. Then you can almost, there's the opposite rudder forward stick when it stops, but you can just play with the controls, see how little movement will get it out of the spin. You can accelerate the spin. So those are things to do to kind of play with the spin. I don't have inverted anything, no fuel and oil inverted, so we don't do inverted spins.
Right.
But they're all upright spins, and you can really get comfortable and realize that a spin is not out of control. A spin, it can be unintentional, but you can certainly get out of it with anti-spin controls in a 172. How people hurt themselves in those airplanes, I don't know, because it's work to get it in one. But, aft CG is
it's
probably...
work to get it in one.
Aft CG would be the time they probably get in a spin. But
is that a flat spin, the aft CG?
It'll be flatter. It'll spin slower. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, the Citabria is great for that training, too. And then the helicopter, now I do all ratings in the helicopter because... it's harder to get helicopter time. I've instructed, and then I've also been a renter at various places.
Right.
And you had said helicopters just period are dangerous.
Well, that's what I heard. I was talking with a helicopter owner who also flies planes. He has a R44.
Yeah,
something.
R44.
And he was just he flies it, he loves it, but he was just telling me like helicopters are dangerous.
There's more that can go wrong. So you're in your airplane, you start the engine, and it's idling with the prop spinning and the brakes on. Very little can go wrong.
Right.
A helicopter, just sitting there with the rotor turning, there are all kinds of things that can go wrong. Oh, excuse me, gust of wind. You're flying from the moment you start it. Now a tailwheel airplane, you're flying it all the way to the chocks. A helicopter sitting still, you're flying it. Because the wind can affect the disc. The blades can sail if they're turning slow. Anytime you're starting to produce lift, if you stick one skid but not the other, or you're moving sideways, dynamic rollover, it'll just pivot over and crash. So there's all these hazards that go with flying helicopters that you got to be paying attention every second of every moment of every hour that you're flying it. You got to be paying attention and hands on the controls. Taking your hands off the controls, you'll trim it up and let it go.
So it's a different type of experience altogether.
As far as manual control, now granted that you can get them with, autopilots and you add features that make it easier, lower your task load. But when you're actually flying it, it is more demanding than an airplane.
Got it.
But that's also part of the reward.
100%.
Is you become part of that machine and the magic of it. That you can, the first time you do it, you pick up and you're 2 feet in the air, you're flying.
Yeah.
You are literally flying at that moment. You're not going anywhere, but you're flying. And then moving forward, taking off the aerodynamics. When we started to talk aerodynamics, when I was taking helicopters, I'm like, yeah, I'm a jet pilot from the Air Force. I know all about aerodynamics. And I'm like, no. The aerodynamics of a spinning disc with blades, one blade's going forward, one blade's going aft. The pitch is changing. You can stall the retreating blade, and the forward blade's still flying. So you start to lose lift on the disc, and it's a gyroscope. So everything that happens here, the result is here, 90 degrees out in the direction of rotation. So you kind of have to think about it, but it's rigged so that you don't, so that this will move you forward, this will move you left, right.
Oh, so actually when I move the stick in a helicopter, it's physically moving something in the 90 degrees.
But what's interesting is, so you move the stick forward, say you're in a two-bladed R44, and you get the blades here and here, you move the stick forward, nothing happens there, it happened over here.
Oh.
So when you move the stick side to side, you can watch the blade change pitch forward and aft.
That's fast. I did not know that.
It is a little counterintuitive the way it's rigged. I think on a 44, it's actually 73 degrees out. It's also the there's a word for it, and I can't think of it right now. But how solid the blade is. Like two blades. But you can get up to, 5, I think there are 12 blade helicopters.
So the more blades, the more what?
You'll have a little more solidity in the disc, and it'll have more momentum.
Got it.
So there is a inertia. Rotor blade inertia is a big thing. R-22s don't have a lot. That's a light helicopter. So when the engine quits, but the blade pitch hasn't changed, there's now nothing countering the drag of that blade. The blade will start to slow down.
Oh.
So what you'll have to do is lower the collective, reduce the pitch in the blades to keep the rotor RPM up. So just like in an airplane, when you are, say you're approaching a stall, right? You're slowing down. You fix that by pushing forward.
Right.
Okay, that reduces the AOA, and now you're going downhill, but your airspeed is increasing over your wing. You're maintaining laminar flow and lift.
Right.
And a helicopter has nothing to do with really the forward motion of the helicopter. The blades don't know and don't care.
Right.
So the blades are spinning. So if you don't do something to reduce drag so the blades don't slow down, they'll stop. They'll start making less and less lift and then they'll keep slowing down.
And I don't have wings which I could glide down to the ground with. I'll fall like a potato.
If you let the blades slow down. But if you shove the collective down, just like a paper helicopter, you let go and it auto-rotates down, but at a fixed speed. It is producing some lift, or it would continue to accelerate the blades on a helicopter. And I gave you that analogy before. You're in a Cirrus, has a parachute. A helicopter is like a Cirrus. It has its parachute deployed all the time. So if the engine quits, your parachute's out, and it's already spinning, you just shove down the collective, maintain the rotor speed, and then fly to the surface without
so interesting.
Power. And then at the bottom, you can take your forward speed and trade it for rotor speed. Is you flare the helicopter. You want to get low speed, and that's the thing about a helicopter. Unlike an airplane, you got to have forward speed all the way to the ground,
right?
Because you got to fly it to the surface,
right? You
don't want to stall it in; that's going to hurt,
right?
So, but a helicopter, you can have zero speed when you touch down. So you flare that off. The energy you got, altitude gives you energy. You transfer it to the blades on the way down. So the blades maintain a constant speed, and they're producing lift all the way down. When you get near the surface, you flare. The act of flaring, it's like pulling G's. So you pull G's, more airflow up through the rotor, spins it faster, or at least maintains its speed as you're flaring and slowing. Then when you level the skids, an unnatural act for an airplane guy is to push forward near the ground.
Right.
But you got to push forward to level the skids, and then at the last minute, your collective increases the pitch in the blades. And you trade that last little bit of rotational energy, the blade inertia, and then you increase the pitch, making lift to soften the touchdown.
Whoa.
And so you can land anywhere. But like I was telling you, if you flew a helicopter exactly like an airplane, it would be safer all day long, because if the engine quits, you can land at zero speed.
That's so interesting. So you already have your shootout.
Yeah, exactly. You already have your shootout. But the fact why helicopters, it was that, anytime the blades are spinning, you're subject to a whole lot of things that can go wrong. Dynamic rollover.
Right.
There's a thing called ground resonance, where the blades get out of sync, just like a washer on the spin cycle when all the clothes get to one side and it shakes.
Oh, yeah. That's a good
or
analogy.
Troops marching across a bridge when they're all in sync and the bridge starts to shake. Well, the whole helicopter will tear itself apart. So that's a scary thought. So, and there's things to mitigate that. Oleos on the struts, lead lag dampers on the blades, and keeping your blade RPM up will keep the blades on a 3-bladed 120 degrees apart. So it won't shake.
Whoa.
And then what are other things that can go wrong? Well, anything like a plastic bag gets in your tail rotor and your tail rotor becomes ineffective.
Yeah.
Then you'll start to spin.
So it's more of an act. So flying a helicopter compared to an airplane, it sounds from our conversation, it's more of a constantly active,
it's very dynamic,
involved.
Yeah. And you got to be paying attention. Where the wind is coming from is very important. You wouldn't think, a helicopter can land downwind. In theory, yeah. Airplane, you can't. We can have zero airspeed, obviously. It's a helicopter. But I don't want to transition through having a tailwind. I always want to land a helicopter into the wind because you get something called translational lift. So effective translational lift, just like your airplane has vortices coming off the wingtips, a helicopter has a vortex coming off the rotor blades.
Oh, yeah.
And so high-pressure air from the bottom circulates and goes through the top of the blade. So there's essentially a donut around the blade tips that the helicopter, the blades are pushing down on descending air. Well, you don't get as good a purchase on descending air, so they don't produce as much lift
Right.
in that outer portion of the blades. But once I get moving forward and the air, the vortex on the blade tip starts to strip away, and now instead of being stuck to my wingtips, it goes aft, and now the blade is constantly in clean air, I get more lift magically. Not magically, but you know what I'm saying. I suddenly get more lift, so by landing into the wind, I keep my effective translational lift longer. If I'm landing in a 20-knot wind, I'll keep it all the way through touchdown.
Wow.
But around 16 to 24 knots, you lose that effective translational lift as the vortices start to adhere to the blades. Now you lose that extra lift from the blade tips, but you know it's coming.
Right.
And that's the thing about being a helicopter pilot, is anticipating the next thing that's going to change. Is okay, you'll feel a little shudder as those blades start to go in, out of and into vortex ring state. Like, okay, I'm starting to, well, it's not really vortex ring state, but you start to get that little vortex sticking to the blades. And you'll feel it, and you'll have to increase power a little bit to hover, and then set down. So that's what's rewarding about it, is you're thinking your way through the sky, and you have to think about everything. There are no moments you're not thinking about flying the machine. If they are, that's when you're vulnerable to a bad thing biting you, is it'll sneak up on you.
Absolutely fascinating. So before we wrap up, I
Sure.
could talk with you for days, Glenn. This is so fascinating to me. But because you provide upset recovery training and things like that, and you're a flight instructor and you're an airline pilot, so I think you'd be a fitting person to talk about this. How helpful would it be to all pilots if it were required for everyone to learn spins?
I think it would be great.
How do you see that?
I think anything, because you've seen this too, is there are people who are afraid of the aircraft.
Right.
They can operate it, but they're intimidated by it.
Right.
And I would like to see everybody, it's a hunk of metal or fabric or tubing or whatever it's made out of. You're the master of the thing. So if everybody had the feeling that this thing does what I tell it to, and I'm in charge, it's just that attitude adjustment from doing aerobatics and upset recovery and spin training that I'll never forget this. One of my other students, I was a little jealous because his instructor said, this was in pilot training. So one of my buddies who had a different instructor, his instructor said to him, I want you to fly the crap out of this machine. And he goes, there's nothing you can get it into that I can't get it back out of. And it was a confidence builder, because then now he knows I can take this machine to its limits and really learn to fly it. And I thought, that's such a good way to approach this. And that's what I want with my students. So sometimes, especially experienced guys, airline guys or flight instructors, they're trying to fly really careful parameters. Like, I just want to do some wing overs. They're just big lazy eights. And I go, just do it. I go, don't think about the parameters. I want it to be smooth. I want the bank and pitch to be constantly changing the whole time. And I don't stop and go, oh, that one was messed up. Do another one.
Yeah.
I go, just keep going, and then that's how you're going to learn it, is just keep making small adjustments as you go. So that kind of training facilitates somebody being the master of the machine.
Builds their confidence.
Just owning it, yeah. So I take it up high. Altitude buys you time. If we get messed up, we got parachutes on. I have to teach it and brief it because they're required.
Right.
And those are some of my barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have Citabrias on the field, but and you can go single seat. Remember, the FAA will let you hurt yourself. You can go by yourself without a parachute and do everything you want.
Right.
But once you add another person, then both occupants need a parachute.
Right.
So, and I can't advertise that I do this unless I'm meeting the FARs. I would be wrong to have a customer show up and say, hey, just so you know, we're going to do this on the sly without chutes.
Right,
No, we're
right,
not. You need to learn, it's another, just like your plane has a parachute.
Right.
I go, we have these, and I go, either the plane breaks or we have a midair. That would be the reasons that we might need these chutes.
A parachute, yeah.
And that means we already made one mistake somewhere along the way, but we'll still live to tell the story. We'll live to fly another day.
Love it. Glenn, well, let's wrap this up with, what would you tell someone out there watching who is, I don't know, thinking about getting into flying, Air Force, wants to be a pilot, isn't sure if they have it in them? because it could be an intimidating thought just to like be that kid and see planes landing and not being sure if that's something you could do. I know that was true for me. What would you tell, or what do you tell people when you meet them, if you have something?
They need to go to an air show.
Okay.
They need to go to an air show and watch some air acts. If it thrills them, great. If it doesn't, it might not be their kind of flying. But then go to all the exhibitions and ask questions. Ask good questions. Try to envision yourself being that person and see what they think. And then see about getting a flight. Go up. And I would even say the best first flight would not be a first lesson.
Right.
I know Cessna offers discovery flights, and that would be okay. But you don't want to be intimidated at all. You just want to see what it's like. Go up with a friend. That's what I did. I knew I wanted to fly anyway, but my friend already had his license, and we went up in his Cessna 152, and we went up north here and saw the MASH site where they used to film MASH.
Right.
And it had the tent. They were still filming it then. Had the tent with the red X on top, and it's cool, something you saw from television. But, and obviously he let me try the controls, and I watched him fly. And I go, oh, that's pretty cool. I would dig this.
Yeah.
So if you got a friend in the family, or they have a friend to go take you flying, or find someone like me. And I've taken people in my back seat where it wasn't really a lesson. I did the takeoff and the landing, but I let them have all the stick time in the middle. And that is a good way to go. I've taken both my daughters. Yeah, nothing clicked.
Yeah.
But I go, it's my family business, really. So I go, well, let's see if they'll light up to it.
Right.
And wasn't their thing. They've got their own thing going on.
I love it.
I want to say, the more things you expose yourself to, the more likely you are to find the thing that does it for you.
Right.
And it can change over time. And maybe you don't want flying as a career. It's okay. It could be just a fun thing you do.
Right. And I'm sure you, as I, met people who, things clicked in the plane and they actually started not hating it on lesson number 8. They started not puking as much.
Right.
So that's true too. There's things, they might not fall in love immediately, but I love it. Go to an air show. I've never heard that. So that's an interesting, and air shows are good places to meet individuals.
Yes.
Who you could talk to.
Take cards, take pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get familiar with stuff. Well, Glenn, like I said, I could talk to you for days, but I really learned a lot. I really did.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I'm trying to think of all the things we talked about. You did a good job leading us through it, but...
Yeah, I appreciate it. But before we sign off here, so how could people find you?
Oh, well, just call, text, email.
Okay.
It's...
So spell out your email, but go slow to make sure if someone's writing it down or something.
Okay, so it's Glenn with 2 N's, GLENN, S, that's my middle initial, Roberts, and that's all together, ROBERTS. So Glenn S. Roberts at iCloud.com.
At iCloud.com.
And if they text me, then I'll text them back a copy of my availability.
Okay.
And I've got pictures of me with both my aircraft, and then I've got links to the flight manuals for each of the aircraft.
Yes. Do you have like a website?
I do. It's Arizona Skies Aviation. So all one word, just like it sounds. Arizona Skies Aviation at Gmail. Oh, did I say that right?
It's on my ArizonaSkiesAviation.com. That's a website.
Yeah, .com.
Okay, so not an email. And
I have an email there too.
And so you'll send all that to me. That'll be in the description of this video. So if anyone's watching this, they could just pop the description and get a hold of you. And you are located in the Phoenix area.
Oh, yeah, Deer Valley Airport.
Deer Valley.
And Deer Valley Airport used to be super busy, but the flight school that was there moved. So now it's like Shady Acres. I'll be the only plane. They got 2 runways, and I'll be the only plane on the north training runway. Yeah, so it's pretty nice. It's like, I'll joke with my students. I go, we'll take off again, doing a touch and go, and we're clear to land instantly.
I love it.
It's like our own private airfield.
Yeah, that must make a big difference if all you were used to were flight schools, because those things get busy.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's
flight
true.
School flying. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Glenn, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Awesome. Solid.